Staffed by somebody.
You'll stand and join us for the pledge of allegiance.
It's the workers' comp account.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you will continue to stand and please pray with me. Lord God, we just pause to acknowledge the incredibly loving God you are, Lord. Thank you for allowing us this time today to be a part of your creation, Lord. And I just pray that in all that we do tonight, the actions that we take, the words we say, the thoughts that we have, that they be honorable in your sight. We pray in your name, Jesus. Amen.
So just to make sure, everybody who signed in is here for the public hearing, correct? Not public comment. All right. So there are no public comments for this evening. So we move to the additions, deletions, and adoption of agenda. I would like to add, we are passing a resolution against Senate Bill 349, or I'm asking council to pass a resolution against Senate Bill 349 and House Bill 401 that would repeal single-family zoning in municipalities across the state. So council has emailed a copy of that, and I would like to put that in the consent agenda, if that's okay. So we'll add the resolution, resolution number 2021-03, opposing SB 349 and House Bill 401 to the consent agenda. I would like to add the final plat of Heritage Phase 2A, Section 7 and 8. Can we make it item 6A and make Gregory's appointment 6B? And can the call for a public hearing be added to consent?
Yep.
Okay. I would also like to add into consent as item G, to call for a public hearing on 5 Stone CEP amendment for May 10th at 7 p.m. So that would be item G in the consent agenda. And does anyone have anything else to add or delete?
So the discussion regarding heritage is going to be 6, a portion of, or part of 6. It's not going to be part of the consent agenda.
Right. We'll make Heritage 6A.
Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay. All right. So we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. That's amended.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. That leads us to our finance officer's report. To set a date for our May 2nd workshop. So Cheryl?
Okay, that was fast. Okay. During the month of March, I moved $400 from contingency to dues to pay the CRTPO dues. I also wanted to ask council to approve the write-off of $850 for 3 invoices to Elise Canas.
So you need a motion?
Yeah.
So motion
Second.
for coming to the settlement agreement. Oh, so I have a second. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Okay. Otherwise, let's see, during the month, we got our quarterly shared revenues came in, and we're looking real good. Pipe natural gas is still low, but that tends to be a seasonal thing, so our very next payment should be the one that should have the bulk of the revenue, although it may come in low overall, I'm not sure. but the other accounts are fine. As far as expenditures, we paid those dues I mentioned. We paid the legal fees for the Board of Adjustment hearing. And that's about all I have.
Any questions for Cheryl before we set our date?
Cheryl, I know I asked you this earlier in the month, but the issue with Urban Forester, did they hire a replacement?
To my knowledge, they have not. I've asked them twice.
But we are still paying them as if they have somebody there doing the service for us?
We pay it once a year, and we paid our payment earlier in the year, and they did send me a new invoice for the next year, and I asked them why there wasn't a credit for the amount, for the 3 months we haven't had one, and no one's replied to that either.
Can we ask if that can be paid more like quarterly instead of yearly? Because we've gone for the first quarter of 2021, no service, nobody sitting in that seat, and we're still paying people.
I will say we probably got our money's worth this year. He did a lot of work, but for fiscal year 2021-22, there's no one in that seat.
Right.
I don't know that we should be paying for it.
Let me check the contract and see when you can back out of it.
I mean, we're not the
For
only
next
people
year.
that are paying them too, so I think, if it makes more sense to pay them on a quarterly basis.
Well, the contract's all or nothing.
Well, I understand the contract, but at the same time, I think it should be in quarterly increments, not monthly, that's too tedious. But, we've gone 4 months into this calendar year, and
But I mean, once we're in the contract, we can't say, oh, I'm not paying you this quarter.
they have to fill the position.
I would think they would have to fill the position before they can ask us to pay for the position.
Right. I mean, we're paying for an empty seat.
I'll see when we can back out of the contract.
I mean, I'm not trying to back out of the contract, I'm just trying to get something for the taxpayers' money that we're spending.
Right. I think that the real issue is not so much this contract we're trying to get out of it or anything. It's like when we're paying for a service, how is the financials handled when that service isn't delivered for a period of time because of a vacancy? I think that's the real gist of our concern.
Correct.
Quite honestly, we haven't had the issue come up here, but it's come up in other towns. The same thing can happen with a deputy. And they don't parcel it out and figure out how many months you didn't have a deputy or how many weeks. You pay for a service, for an overall service.
Right. I don't think there'd be any delay in backfilling the position for a deputy.
There has been in other places.
Well, let's see, maybe they've got, it's been posted for so long now. Let's see if we can get a hiring update.
I sent one. I'll ask again.
Yeah.
I keep asking into the black hole.
We will.
Well, don't pay them any more money until they start.
We only pay once a year, so I paid them last July probably.
Well, don't pay them in July again if they haven't filled that position. And I think, personally, I'd like to see us pay this bill quarterly for this exact reason, instead of paying it once a year. I don't know if we have that ability to control that contract, but
I'd rather see language in the contract about what happened to the position that
either. I just hate spending taxpayers' money and getting zero for it.
Oh, I know, it's frustrating. Mm-hmm.
So for the budget meeting,
Well, I've got another question on the bonus. Cheryl, the CRTPO dues, those are yearly dues?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that covers the primary, the delegate, and TCC, or it covers any of us that go, right, for participation in it?
Well, yeah, it's just our
It's just no
fee.
other fees, but we get to have like 3 people participate.
Are we getting $3,200 worth of value out of that?
I don't know, I haven't seen meeting.
But what do they bring to us, though?
It's about the representation and having a say on the things and being a participant at the table. The things are done with Bjorn Hansen, who's transportation committee county, just today he had his quarterly meeting with Union County rep, delegates, or whatever we're called, and heads up on how things are going, what's going to be coming up on the agendas. He's on a couple of subcommittees, and he shares that. So, this year was just a lot about revenue from the last year and recovering from that and how that's going to be addressed.
Good luck.
Thank you.
You have to do like an ethics statement for the year. So I'm filling in Jan shoes and delegate. It's fun. Any more questions before we take a date? All right, so we need to pick a date for our May budget meeting. So our council meeting will be on the 10th. Planning board, I'm assuming, is the 24th. Mondays are good for me. But I can make whatever work.
You want to prior to our May meeting?
I don't think it matters. Right, Cheryl?
May 3rd's fairly early.
Huh? May 3rd's a little early.
It's a little early. I don't know when I haven't gotten much information from anyone.
I think tax day sounds like a good day to talk about budgets.
How about the 17th? Is anybody's schedule? I'm not that agenda.
I'm good with whatever day the rest of the council chooses. I would ask that, will we have the details on what's the fund with, what's it called?
The fund balance?
No, not the balance that we're getting from the county.
Oh, we don't know. You mean for the Patriot Act?
For the stimulus, the $1.9 trillion that
That is further down, but we don't know. We're still waiting for the
do we have a deadline? I mean, we need that information before we go over the budget.
Well, hopefully we'll have it. It's big government, I mean.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk to that right now?
Sure.
Okay. So Amanda and I both attended a webinar about the American Rescue Plan, and it's all quite nebulous at this point. I also attended a phone call on a Friday, which was very strange, and it was not at all Wesley Chapel. It was more like big city, big entities.
So
We really do not know what we will get, if we will get anything. It's based on, I think it's actually coming through the state. It said that the cities over 50,000, they'll get their money directly, but we don't have that population. So the money will go to the state and they will figure out how to allocate it. And there are some allocations based on population. They also were talking about overlapping entities, and I don't know whether that means Wesley Chapel Fire Department and school systems, and I don't know who is really getting the money. So at this point we have zero information.
And it's been 60 days. We have zero information.
That's what, mid-March?
You want to say that in 60 days is that fast?
They did the law in March, and they said within 60 days money would come down. Half of the allocations would come down, but I double-checked it like last Friday, and there's just no new information. There's just nothing out there. And everything I've seen...
Calendar, no nothing.
Pardon?
No calendar, no nothing. As to when
No,
this is-
and there's only certain things you can spend the money on, and the things that Amanda and I heard were really not things that we spend money on, so I don't know.
I think it's going to be a challenge.
Yes, we need to know, one, when we're going to get the money, or if we're going to get the money, what the restrictions are, what we can spend it on, and we need to,
So we don't have that.
Right. But I don't think it matters for the budget because that money is coming in for a very specific earmarked purpose, and our budget continues for our normal operating expenses, et cetera. And should that money become available to free up our money we budgeted for, it can go back into the fund balance we've been pulling out of for so long.
Well, I would think that,
It would be nice, but I don't think it's critical.
60 days would definitely be mid-May, so hopefully we'll have information by then.
okay,
But it did say that municipalities with less than 50,000, like, if we got anything, it would be no more than 75% of our pre-pandemic operating budget. And then the amount we get is based on our population, basically added into all the other municipalities that are less than 50,000 residents. So, I mean, it could be nothing, we could get nothing. And it is very strictly tied to what you can and cannot do with it.
So we're going to go into the budget with, pretend we don't get anything, we'll be happy if we get anything.
If I find out any more, I will definitely let you know, but
Please.
I have tried to stay on top of it.
Cheryl, I will ask if there's going to be any more webinars or phone calls or community type things that we can get on. I'd like to know about those. I'd like to know about them in advance so we can choose whether we sit in on those or not. I mean, I know you as the clerk need that information and want to sit in on those, but some of the rest of us might want to be part of those webinars as well and either watch or ask questions or just basically get the general information.
Well, and I will say, I mean, we can all sign up for those emails, but there are also, I mean, I was an elected mayor, but I've been served mayor for a year, and there are some times that I do things administratively that I don't feel like I have to invite everybody to. So that's why we do
If you go to the League of Municipalities website, they have as much information as anybody. And I haven't heard of any more webinars or
You
anything.
know, there hasn't been anything else coming on.
I would just like that. I would just like the information to be shared if you have it.
But you can subscribe to them and school of government and you get the emails yourself.
I understand.
All right, so May 17th, how does that look? Last year we started at 6, didn't we? Didn't we start early? We
I can't remember. We could, whatever you want to do.
I know that's difficult for some people working, so we just stick at 7.
I'm going to go 6.
You don't want to try for 6, and then we can maybe get out a little early. Yeah. All right, so let's call. When would we call for the special meeting, Cheryl?
You can do it right now. Or you can wait. You can do either way.
Do you want to wait, Lauren, or?
No, you can go with that, and if I run into something, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I mean, you'll still have a forum, though.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and call for a special meeting on May 17th at 6 p.m. for next year's budget. That could be a motion, or I can call for it.
Motion.
Okay. So I made a motion, do I have a second? All in favor? All right. See you at 6 p.m. That brings us to the, sharing everything else.
No.
Okay. That brings us to 6A, which is the final plat of Heritage Phase 2A, Section 7 and 8. Bob, you want to do this for that?
Sure. The developer of Heritage Subdivision submitted an application for final plat approval for sections 7 and 8 for Phase 2A in December. The preliminary plat for this phase was approved by the Village Council back in August of 2020. This is only for the portion of Phase 2A that is within the Village of Wesley Chapel. That's something that's really interesting about the subdivision that straddles the boundaries of the Wesley Chapel community. Since the submission in December of the final plat, I and the engineer worked with the developer to review it, address any deficiencies that are identified, and to establish the value for the performance guarantees for infrastructure improvements that have not been completed. Final review of those outstanding items was completed in mid-February and were noted to all have been addressed. The planning board reviewed the final plat at the meeting on March 22nd and gave a unanimous recommendation for the village council to approve the plat as submitted. The final plat checklist requirements have been determined to be complete, including all outside approvals and establishment of the value of performance guarantees necessary to make such additional construction improvements as required to receive final approval. The required performance guarantees have been submitted in draft form to staff, and Cheryl actually received the bond from the developer's representative last week. So based on the satisfaction of the subdivision ordinance requirements, staff recommends that the village council give approval to the final plat for sections 7 and 8 of Phase 2A of the Heritage subdivision and accept the submitted performance guarantees for the completion of the remaining infrastructure.
Oh, I got one question.
Yes, sir.
Approving previous phases on this, we ran into a small issue between Wesley Chapel on one side of the line and Indian Trail on the other side, with the lighting plan. And just because our ordinances are different between Indian Trail and Wesley Chapel, where in Indian Trail it says the average distance between street lights should be about 200 feet, where ours say cannot exceed 200 feet. Was that specifically looked at, on this? I know it's a small little section, but I don't want to run into a problem where it's 203 feet or 201 feet, and then all of a sudden you've got to go back and readdress it.
Well, the lighting plan would have been approved at the preliminary plat, and then I can't recall if David wants to address the outstanding infrastructure on that, but before Bonnie's construction inspectors signed off on that, they would identify the streetlights, make sure they were installed at the correct locations.
Okay, so those are already done.
Yeah, whatever was approved eventually would be inspected as part of the.
I know it's a small detail but we got into a big hurrah about it about 3 or 4 years ago, about average versus not to exceed 200.
Right.
So
you feel everything's in order to move forward? So I will, yes, sir.
I'll pose a question to the planning board chair.
Sure.
John, was there any discussion about this during your meeting?
We had a meeting and everything we were satisfied with. We had voted 5-0 to approve.
Did you guys have the final plat?
We have
Was there a reason that the final plat was not included in our packet of information?
and we just got this like at 1 o'clock today.
I just got this like
There's anything else?
23 minutes ago.
Okay. Yeah, it came later.
This afternoon.
It was my error.
I don't feel comfortable voting on something without looking at it and reviewing it first. I would recommend we postpone vote until next month.
I can support that.
I can make it a motion. I make a motion that we postpone the vote until next month to give us ample time to review the information.
Second.
All in favor? Sorry, David. So we will make sure to put that item on our main agenda.
Was that a unanimous vote?
No,
It was 2-2?
3-1. 3 yeses, 1 no.
You were yes? Okay, thank you.
No.
No, you were no. Okay.
So that brings us to item 6B, appointment of Gregory Development to Communications Committee. I guess formally appoint him. They do have several open slots on the Communications Committee. He attended our last meeting. And he has a lot of experience and he's a PIO. So I think he can bring a lot of value to the Communications Committee. So is that all I have to do?
Mhm.
All right. So that brings us to item 7, the Parks and Rec report.
Good evening, Council. So we were unable to have a meeting, regular scheduled meeting due to lack of quorum last month, but that doesn't mean we haven't been busy. We've been storming ahead with planning for the June 19 event at Dogwood Park. I don't know if you're aware, other municipalities around us are now storming ahead with events, live music events in Waxhaw, music in Monroe. So I guess the feeling is that with everybody getting vaccinated, restrictions being eased, live music events are now okay as long as you follow the guidelines from the government. And I can talk about those for this event if you like. So one thing I've gotten from you guys today is the budget for the event. As you know, all year, as we've not been doing events, we've been nibbling at our event budget and using the money for other things. Although I've tried to keep everything on the cost standpoint to a minimum. We only have $3,200 left in the event budget, and I'm thinking it's going to be about 4,300 and change to pull off this event. That's the gross amount. We will get some revenue sharing from beverage sales. Last time it was around $600. So if you take off the revenue share from the beverage sales, the net event expense will be $3,700. But Cheryl tells me I have to ask you guys for the gross amount because there's no guarantee that the beverage sale proceeds will be $600. So we are about $1,200 shy of being able to fund this event at the rate indicated. I'll just run over for you what's included. If you look at the column on the far right, the total, one of the big expenses is $1,080. That's for 6 deputies that they ask us to have. 2 for crossing the road, 1 for the gate, and 3 standing around chatting to each other because we're serving alcohol in case anything goes awry.
John, we had an issue with this last time that, like you said, we ended up with more deputies than we felt we needed. And at the same time, we couldn't direct the deputies to do what we thought were
That's correct.
Critical issues.
They don't report to us. And when I complain that, hey, I've seen a guy leaving the barrier area with a beer in his hand, he said, don't worry, I've got 2 guys up on the road, they ain't leaving the park with a beverage in their hand, was his response. So they don't report to us. They tell us how many people we need. We tell them, we've given them the event layout, where we're putting the barriers, how many people we expect, and they tell us how many deputies we need.
Of those 6, can one of those be Brandon?
Possibly, yeah.
No, that's in addition to Brandon. Last time we paid for 7, so they came down 1 this time.
Well, I don't like the fact that we're spending that kind of money and we don't have any control over what they do. I mean,
No, you complained about this before, you don't have control of what Brandon does either, so I can't tell this sheriff what he's got to do.
So you said the number of deputies was based on the number of attendees. What's your estimate on attendance?
We told them last time it was 600, could be 900 this time, I don't know. For this kind of event last time for the car show, we had about 600.
and John, what's the beginning and ending on the timeline? It starts at what time?
Starts at 4, ends at 9. So I got the deputies 3:30 to 9:30. Half an hour before and half an hour.
Well,
So
park typically closing at dusk. Why are we going so late into the night with this?
When we experimented with events in the summer, it was way too hot for an outdoor music event during the day in the summer. And then when we did one in the winter, we did it at night, it was way too cold. So what we learned from experimenting was in the summer, you want events late afternoon, early evening, and in the winter you want them when it's sunny during the day.
And John, I'm reading down here, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead on your presentation, but the lighting,
Yeah.
you got one for $658 and one for $516.
Right, the different types of light. The playground lighting, the rechargeable battery operated floodlights that we can, I'll get to that one in a minute.
Okay.
Those are the dam and access route lights. So I found some cheaper ones that I think will be suitable for the playground. We can use pipe clamp, like a big hose clamp, to attach them to the fencing, and we can floodlight the playground. One of the complaints at past events was there's nothing for the kids to do. So since we'll be running the event into dark, if we put 4 floodlights around the playground, children will be able to use the playground in the evening. Now, these are rechargeable batteries. The ones for the playground, I'm proposing purchasing 4. That $658 includes the batteries for those. And then for the dam, we had a complaint, people tripping because there wasn't enough light going up the trail to the 84 and across the dam. So Mike, the picture you just showed, it's $516 for 2 of those. That includes the battery. Yeah.
It still shows $399, $400 a piece. For this stuff.
Maybe I've got those flips around, but you can buy them with the battery. I looked up the price at Lowe's, so I'm pretty sure my number's right. Anyway, lighting, $1,174 for the lighting for the dam, the access route, and the playground. We can use those at future events. Entertainment services, which includes the sound tech and the performance, $1,000. Car show, $100. Truck rental, $100. The banner, we're going to reuse the ones we used that last time. I just guessed that to print a strip with a new date and time, and we'll velcro it on the old banners to save money.
Did you find the? Amy couldn't find the banners.
Mike's got them. I told Amy Mike's got them.
Okay.
Somehow they didn't get moved yet, but we've got them.
Okay.
What's the truck for?
And then, sorry?
What's the truck for?
The truck to move the sound equipment from the town hall to the park.
It's usually $90, and then
It's gone up. It was 75 last time, I think, and Cheryl said it's gone up.
It went up.
So what I'm suggesting, if you've not got any more questions on that table, is that we take, since we've nibbled too much on the event budget, we take $1,200 from the $7,000 that's available in the playground budget line and move it from there, because we're not going to be spending any more on the playground, I don't think. So from the $7,000 available in the playground budget line, take $1,200 and move it to events.
John, are we done with the extra benches and picnic tables in the playground?
Yeah, for this budget year, yeah. We just received the message today that they see they're going to be delivered soon. Picnic tables are already here, the benches are coming. We just got a message.
We have not paid for them though.
But we've not paid for them yet, but that.
But that's a separate line item.
That's in the bench budget line.
Okay.
Other things related to the event, in addition to the funding of it, we were thinking that instead of having a car registration fee, which is very normal for car shows, that we ask participants in the car show to make a voluntary donation, an amount for them to decide. We won't dictate how much it is. And the thought was we'd make that fundraiser for the charity called Semper Fi. If you do some research, it's the highest rated veterans charity in the country. The highest percent of funds they receive actually goes to wounded soldiers and their families. So we're suggesting that Semper Fi be the charity that we raise funds for through the car show. Related to that, we're going to have a registration process on a first come, first served basis, and we're going to ask people to submit a check made out to Semper Fi charity directly, and then we'll just collate the checks and mail them to the charity, rather than them writing checks to the village and us having to total them, and then the village writes a check to the charity. But some people may show up on the day who haven't pre-registered and they don't bring a checkbook with them, and that raises the issue, if they want to register and give us cash, how do we deal with the cash? My thought would be on the registration form that for pre-registration, enclosed is my check in the amount of, made out of registration. If they show up on the day, they fill out the registration form and say, enclosed is $20 cash donation to the thing, and then somebody collects that We have a record on the registration form of how much cash they gave us. We can add up the registration forms to total the cash, and then we can count the cash and make sure that the question is who's going to collect that cash. And I think somebody suggested we need George's input on how to do it. I'm hoping it's not a lot of people show up that aren't pre-registered, but what do we do if 10 people show up and they all want to make a $20 donation to the Vets cause?
We ought to be able to keep track of $100.
I mean, I'm not sure it's a legal question as so much as a procedural question and how you manage from the, I mean, who's collecting it? Is it the village collecting and making the donation on behalf of the village? Is it, I mean, are these individuals getting their own tax deduction for the contribution, and who's issuing them the letter that determines that? I mean, so I don't. Again, I'm not sure there's a legal issue there so much as it seems like a potential practical problem to collect all that and deal with the charity.
So the options are a committee member does that. Right now, Beth Leonard, former employee of the village, has stepped up to run the car show for us. So Beth is one option. The other is a committee member. The other is a paid staff member.
I don't think that's what he's saying, though. I think he's saying you're accepting a donation on behalf of the charity. We aren't going to write them a tax write-off letter. So will the money be going directly? Could we have that? Is that like a procedural question?
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me you might want to contact the organization to find out, like, here, we're trying to raise money for you, but we're not collecting them and then writing you a check. How do you normally do that?
Normally, I've had this conversation with him. It was a long time ago, because we were planning this a long ways back. She said, no, they won't be sending anybody. She said that you will collect the money and then send it to us if there's any cash. So to try and make it as simple as possible, I thought the registration fee would be a check written directly to the charity, and then we don't have to get involved. In the case we do collect some cash, we'll have the registration forms, we can total up. So if there's 5 people, say they donate 20, we know we should have 100. We can give the 100 to the village, and then the village can write a check to the charity for the $100.
I don't think you want to do that last step at all.
No, why?
Because the village isn't making the donation. Those people are giving the money to the village in that circumstance. So the village isn't a pass-through to the charity. That money needs to go directly to the charity.
Can the charity have a representative at the event? Would that be a way around
I can ask them if they've handled that. I'll ask them again how they.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with, I mean, I could go door to door and collect money for a charity, and people trust me to give me cash at the door. I can send it to the charity and indicate who gave it, but it would be fraud for me to say it's my donation, right? Just like it'd be fraud for the village to say it's their donation. So if there's nothing wrong with collecting money for the charity. It just needs, like, I'm assuming I've never done this before, but I'm assuming those charities have on-site donation forms that can be filled out. So I'm giving $20. Here's my name and information, and that goes in with the total. So you have 10 people give $20. You got $200 in an envelope that goes with 10 sheets that have their name and information on them.
And
Mike?
they have to do a receipt for a certain amount. So at some point, they've got to have those actual donors' names and everything.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They've got to have some kind of on-site donor. I mean, I feel like I've filled those things out before.
All right, I'll check with Simplify to see if they have some forms they can give us.
My concern was someone that's not an employee. Employees are bonded for the cash. And my concern is to have cash being at an event handled by people that aren't a representative of the town. They're not an employee and they're not a committee member. Internal controls, it just is not good.
How do we do that for concessions?
Usually they know in advance and they'll send us a check.
We never have gotten involved in the cash, like of a food truck. They handle their cash.
It's usually-
What about the beverage sales?
That's all done by the Rotary.
That's done by the Rotary. The Rotary take all the money.
Then just do, to satisfy Cheryl's concern, just have I'm sorry, we're not accepting donations, but here's the information on how you can donate online or otherwise and pass it out.
Well, again, I mean, you're saying that we don't have a registration fee, right?
The registration fee is a voluntary donation.
Exactly. So I would put that on something to say, hey, send this in later. Here's an envelope.
All right.
Yeah.
Fine.
Expect it to be equal.
That's a very practical, simple solution. Got it. We'll do that.
So you'll reach out to them and find out.
I'll reach out to them for a form. If somebody shows up on the day, they haven't pre-registered by sending us a check to the charity, we hand them a form saying, here you go, please make a donation after the fact.
And they might not even need to send us their check. It could be that they just send it directly to the charity and show us their receipt that they did. You cut out that middleman at all if you can. So we don't have to mail them the check. See,
Yeah.
see how they've done events like this before. See
Yeah,
how they
they
handle the
Last time I talked to them, they said, just collect the checks, collate them. Two ways. We can have them write checks to us, collate them and send them one check, or we can just collect all the checks, put them in an envelope and send them to them. I'd personally like to keep track of how much we raise. I'd like to know that. So I'm quite happy to take on the responsibility of putting all the checks in one envelope and mailing it to them. But I like David's suggestion that we hand them a form and say, please, make your donation after the fact, directly to the vets for those that show up on the day. All right, cool.
How many cars are you expecting?
Sorry?
How many cars are you expecting to participate?
We have 47 paved spaces. Last time we had around 60 cars in the show. We parked some of them on the grass. People showed up in a pickup truck in the car show. The paved spaces went to first come, first serve. We told people that. And then any overflow, they were advised you're going to need to park on the grass. And they were happy doing that. We had quite a few cars on the grass. Some amazing vehicles. There was like $2 million worth of cars there.
John, one other question with the lights. I understand the lights for the playground need to be battery operated because there's no electricity around there. Is there any way we can look at doing the dam access route because we do have electricity there? Instead of spending $516 to do something that we can just plug in because we do have power there.
We've got an awful lot of extension cables.
Well, we got a transformer right there and outlets. Just seems that to light up the dam, $516 seems to be a lot when we've got electricity already on that area. But we run string lights.
The lighting we had last time completely insufficient.
I know, which is why we're looking at spending well over $1,600, $1,100 just for lighting for the event. But
Instead of buying those, which can be used that other way, we could buy a bunch of 12 gauge, because if you run a long line, you've got to have a pretty thick gauge cable. We could buy a whole bunch of extension cords and
we just buy solar lights too. I mean, we're only talking about from the time the sun goes down to the end of the event, so it's not like it's going to need to run all night.
Which is not that long at all. According to the National Weather Service, on the 19th, it is projected that sunset will be at 8:39 p.m.
The event goes to
run to 9.
Yeah, and we're going to 9 or 9.
Yeah, we'll have about an hour and a half.
Move the event up an hour, and then we don't worry about lighting at all.
Yeah, I like that.
So do 3 to 8.
I mean, that would still give everybody 40 minutes, and actually, twilight ends at 9:08, so that would give you plenty of time to get a parking.
And we do have lighting everywhere except, like I said, on the dam and on the playground. So,
And that frees up your $1,200.
yeah, John, yeah. We do have lighting across to the church.
Yeah.
But it just seems like an awful lot of money just to run the lighting over the dam and on the playground.
All right. So we moved the event 3 to 8, and we solved the lighting issue. We can take that.
That's,
$174 out.
there you go.
And then,
Almost balanced right there.
yeah.
You are balanced.
And you've got $115 for hand washing stations. Didn't we just buy like 6 of those this year?
Not hand sanitizers. This is because you're having a food truck, you gotta have walls to wash your
the
hands.
sinks.
Sinks is what I mean, yeah.
No, that's fine.
Food truck would be.
Sorry?
Where would the food truck be?
Stuff up usually.
So we're having, we've talked to Howie's Pizza, and we've talked to one of the Baptist churches that is going to do hot dogs, burgers, and funnel cake. I forget the name of the church. It's a local church. They've done events at the park before, and they were quite happy to step up, because they'll make some money for their church out of that service.
Is it Union Methodist?
I think it might be.
I think it is.
Are they paying us anything to come to this?
No, we're not charging food vendors yet. Once we start bringing 2,000 people to an event routinely, I want to start charging food vendors. I'd like to see us get a cut. Not this time around. So, right, we've handled the registration, fee donations on site. You're okay with the vet charity being simplified. The last one, remote possibility, but I thought it'd be real cool to have a helicopter flyover. Are you okay with me filling out the forms to apply for it to the National Guard?
Does it cost anything?
No. Doesn't cost anything. You just fill out a form, you send it in, you say, can I have a flyover? And they say yes or no. They may say no, but they say yes, it'd be real cool. You okay with that? Alright, so I need the money moving. You want? Yeah. No, I don't need much money moving at all.
You don't need it at all.
I don't need anything.
We'll take our lights out.
On other money needs, we got some trees like this that are dead and fallen. They've knocked other trees that are like this, that are leaning towards the trail. Before they fall on somebody, I think we need to take care of it. I don't have quotes yet. I was hoping to get rid of the guy who's always been the low bidder in the past out today, but he couldn't make it. So I am going to see him tomorrow. But to be prepared for that, I'd like to move $1,000 from land maintenance, where we have, according to Cheryl, 2,400 2,400 available in land maintenance. I'd like to move 1,000 from that to the tree work line, where we've spent all the money.
Well, John, how are we going to, we don't have a quote yet.
Sorry?
We don't have a quote yet.
Based on experience last time about how much it costs to cut trees down, we know it's $500-600 a tree. So, I'm guessing.
Okay.
But I don't want to wait another 6 weeks before we take care of this tree situation.
And what did you budget the land maintenance? The fund you want to take the money from, the land maintenance on that budget. What were you in? The land maintenance that you want to move the money from?
Yeah.
What were you intending to use that money for?
Some of it will be used for our monthly bill for the land maintenance. We were anticipating a price increase, and we budgeted for a price increase. And it didn't go up as much as we anticipated, so there's a bit left.
Okay. I was wondering how we ended up with that money.
I think we budgeted 5% and we had no increase, yeah.
And then also from that line, I'd like to move another $500 to, because I got no money to take care of the muskrats. As you know, we started taking care of the muskrats, then they went dormant. The guy said he'll need to come out again in the spring. It's now spring. We probably need to get the guy out again. And talking to Cheryl, we reckon we need $500 to take care of the muskrats. So.
And what budget line item do we use for muskrats? Do they
We
deserve their own
never had
line
one,
item?
So we're looking at taking out land maintenance and putting it in a line for pest control or something.
Pond maintenance. Mhm.
Pond maintenance?
So, that's all I need.
John, I'm sorry, I can back up with my notes here. On the event, do we have a rain date or is it going to be rain or shine?
Well, it can't be rain or shine, so I would say if we're going to do a rain date, it would be the following Saturday.
Okay. And the other thing, looking at the breakdown here, the advertising expense, how are we going to advertise this event?
Social media.
So no advertising expense,
Well, just the banners.
other than the banners.
We're going to put the banners out with the new day on. We've got 3 banners. And we're going to do social media.
Okay, so nothing, we're not stuffing mailboxes, we're not putting that in the paper.
I think you may recall we did a survey last time we did an event and asked people how they heard about it. Next to nobody read the mailer we put in the mailbox, and that needs an awful lot of volunteers to stuff mailboxes in every neighbourhood. There's the printing cost. The vast majority said it was word of mouth or social media. So we may put a simple poster up in the notice board at the park. We'll blast social media, the village website, and word will spread.
Okay. Sorry to go backwards, but I just want to things that I don't do.
But we need you to finally sign off on the event, say it's a go, because we got to start booking people and doing a contract with the deputies.
Okay, so what do we need to put that in place? Just a motion that we're okay in the budget with the amended times
And the removal of the lighting fee.
and the removal of the lighting fee? Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yeah. Do we also need to make a motion on the tree removal, moving that money? All right, I'll make a motion that we move the $1,000 from
Land maintenance.
Land maintenance, tree list.
the tree work to acquire 3 quotes and move forward with that.
Now, we expecting John to come back to court, or just let him know.
Oh,
Second. So I guess the question is, are we giving John carte blanche once we move the money, and once he gets the quotes, he's just going to go ahead and have the work done? Or does he have to come back to council and go through the red tape?
So they give them liberty to go ahead and have the work done.
I mean, I see it as a safety issue. If you got a tree that's leaning, that could potentially fall on a trail or on a person, we let John get quotes and let him go with the lowest quote and coordinate with our clerk Cheryl and just have the work done.
Agreed.
So I'm in favor of it if that's what we're.
So you said he has to get 3 quotes? Is that correct?
Can you get 3 quotes, John, or is it typically that's the way we do it?
I can, but we've done this how many times?
And it's always the
5,
same
6
guy.
times, and the one guy is always the loader. So
And I can call him back to do that.
if you insist I get 3 quotes, I'll ask Cheryl to call 2 other tree services, and we'll get 3 quotes.
I mean, we had a similar issue when we would rent the Bobcat. We would get a quote from 3 different rental companies, but Sunbelt was always the lowest, and we always rented from Sunbelt.
Davis wants 3 quotes, we'll get him 3 quotes. And but then John will just go to the lowest bidder, we'll get it 3 quotes. All right, so all in favor?
Yeah, I had a comment. So, we're coming into the budget planning process. I do not mean to yell, John, but I know it's hard to understand with the math. Knowing that we have trees all the time, we've moved money a couple of times recently for trees. So I think, just look at past experience and we make sure we have, some money in there. But could we also consider kind of like this tree company on retainer, or is our selected vendor or something where we could have a standing contract of some sort to where when these things happen, we can just, say this tree needs to come down and move forward. So it's not having to go get bids every time a tree falls. Maybe something similar.
If I were a contractor, I would not agree to that because you don't know whether you're dealing with a tree that big or a tree this big. So,
Well, there's some details here, but the ability to, because I know you get very frustrated with the red tape, as does Michael, but as a way to cut through that and to say, we vetted this, we've got this agreed price, and they give us price for ranges or whatever, but some way to help us streamline without having to go out for bids every time, because sometimes they are more of an emergency, and unfortunately, emergency can be in the eye of the beholder.
But more to add to that, we do have a clause in our landscaping contract that if it's a small tree, I think so much diameter, 6 to 8 inches or something like that, the landscaper will do it.
I'm talking about the real trees.
The big trees are the ones that we have to deal with.
Those are the ones, and I understand, but I'm just saying, is there a creative way that we can get on some of these more routine expenses to where we're not having to go out for bid for every instant?
That would be my dream come true.
I think it bears worth asking the question, for sure.
I don't know.
Cheryl, do you know how we do? Can we have a tree services agreement with somebody? And
Yeah, the thing is, we haven't taken down very many trees. You know, if we do 2 trees a year.
I approved a lot of trees.
we have 5 this year, no, 4 this year.
Yeah, but then before that, we didn't have any for a couple of years, so, I mean. And the guy that does the low price is not a real big company or
No,
big
he's
sophisticated. He has insurance, but.
Yeah, he has insurance, he's local, he's responsive, he's always been the low bidder.
So maybe you could do
I'm just like
like
he's our preferred vendor, and if he can do it, we can go with him out for 3 bids or something. I mean, just from a procurement perspective, there just has to be some way for some of these things we can get the work we need done more timely, but also, with some control of cost.
All right, well, we can look into that for sure, but we're running that first.
All right, so the last thing is the 500 for the muskrats. So move from land maintenance to pest control line or something.
John, how is he going to get rid of the muskrats?
He traps them and then takes care of them.
Trapping season ends in February, March.
He can get, we've had that discussion with him, he gets a special dispensation for taking, do you remember what he called it?
It was something like continuation. It's to make sure that you're.
He's not relocating the muskrats. He's
He's taking care of them.
But he's also trapping them at
Yes.
some point, the muskrats.
Yes, he's aware of the season and he's advised us there's a way he can get a license that's
All
outside.
good, all good, John. I make a motion that we approve the $500 to remove the muskrats.
second, but he's not putting out poison or anything. So then we have to worry about dogs in the park and everything else.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you, folks.
All right, so that brings, thank you, John. That brings us to our planning board report, and any comments from our planner?
All right, good evening, council. I'm going to discuss what we talked about our last planning board meeting on March 22nd and what's on our agenda for our next planning board meeting this month. Last planning board meeting, we had Mrs. Fuller show up, so thank you very much. A couple others showed up as well, but we heard from Mrs. Fuller, so we had some nice discussion there. Additionally, we did a review for the final plot for the Heritage, which you guys saw earlier, and we did make a suggestion to pass that 5-0. And then we also had held a public information meeting with Five Stones Church amendment to the CUP. And that was, what that application was for, was to amend their preschool for a maximum of 65 children to attend, up to 380. So there was a lot of discussion on that, actually went on for quite a long time. Finally, what we decided was to make a recommendation to council, and I believe we've seen this in your next council meeting, to pass it with an amendment rather than 380 like they're asking. What planning board suggested was a maximum of 150. And what you'll note is at the time they said they currently have 148 children signed up for preschool. Obviously, that's not all at the same time, but that's how many they have. So this would essentially increase their application to the point where it could accommodate the children that are currently signed up. So we suggested passing that with a 4-1 pass.
John, do you have any speak on the public meeting proposing this, what were the objections?
So there was numerous, I have their names, and there was numerous objections.
We should probably not talk about it.
We
This
should
is a
talk about
C.
that.
So the people need to speak for themselves to about their.
Well,
Let's get
No, it's good.
about that.
we'll lay that.
I guess good questions is a public information meeting, so it was a little different than calling on people letting them speak. A lot of back and forth discussion.
Can we ask what the major topic was? Not the people, or how many people spoke to that topic, but what the major topic was?
That's up to Vaughn.
I would.
He's for the George said no.
Ms. Sherman and George.
I would let people come back and tell you directly what they're saying.
All right, next.
That was all. That was pretty much the majority of our meeting, March 22nd. At our next meeting, we have an RA40 rezoning application that we're going to hear. We're going to be going over 160D text amendments, and we'll be discussing status of mechanical equipment next to buildings on small subdivisions, specifically the setback parameters. There's been some issues with that we've got to look into.
John, on the 160D stuff, I needed some questions there from Vaughn. Is there a deadline on this? We've been dealing with this for a while. Is there we're not going to talk about it after this
The
meeting,
plan is for the planning board to make a recommendation at the meeting this month. And then
but is there a deadline for the state?
there's a theoretical deadline of July 1st.
Okay, good, thank you.
So that work takes priority over mechanical work on small.
Yeah, we will address that prior to
Okay, thank you.
discussing that. And if we run out of time, then we can delay that some. An issue arose, I guess last month, is that right? Regarding the Pinnacle subdivision and some interpretations in past discussions with the previous planner about the location of the equipment.
Location of air conditioners and side yard setups. Okay.
That was all. Good.
So finally, we need to talk about the budget amendment for the comp plan. Decide how much we want to take out for this year versus,
Yeah.
or do you need to come back to us in May?
Like I said at the last meeting, if we just want to lump everything into the next fiscal year budget, then we're fine starting beforehand, unless we needed money in there to get started for.
You think we're good?
I don't know if you have for the certification, finance officer certification fund bill. I don't know if you need to have the money budgeted.
The contract didn't address money, did it? Did we have a contract?
No, we haven't.
We haven't.
We got a letter.
Okay,
Yeah, there's no contract.
okay.
You want to get a contract to us in May?
Sure.
How about that? And we can talk offline if we need to. Martha?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
I got another thing we did talk about at the planning board meeting last month was the plan, and discussed some about how the oversight of that would work, and raised the issue with the planning board that given just what I've observed in terms of the typical workload that they have, or at least have had since I've been working with them, is that there generally isn't a lot of time, productive time necessarily available during the regular planning board meetings to be able to do much productive work on something that needs as much attention as a comprehensive plan. And suggested to them that we have meetings, if they are going to be the entity overseeing the planning process, that we would have meetings for that specific purpose on nights that are not their regular planning board meetings, so that we could be productive. And since I don't know if we've had a final determination from the council about its desires for the oversight or composition of the body overseeing, it's probably worth discussing that before we get too far into scheduling things. with the planning board, or whichever entity might be overseeing the process. I don't know if the council had any thoughts to add to that, or
So how many meetings are you envisioning?
there would be at least monthly meetings, probably.
So the planning board would meet twice a month?
I think it would probably be.
If they-
There might be a couple months, but
Right, I'm just,
there's about a year. There'll be about a year to get it, through the planning board and to the council for adoption. And I would imagine most months there would be the need for a meeting of some sort. The length and amount of material would vary from month to month, most likely. But there's just a lot of ongoing process work to do during the development of the plan. So that would, instead of trying to, hoping that there's not going to be something on the planning board agenda that would, cause there to be a 3-hour meeting and adding on at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night to the end of the meeting, we want to, make sure people are fresh and rested and can, address their full attention to the subject.
and you said if we could choose to have a planning board to oversee this, what are other localities doing? How are they managing it?
It's going to be the planning board, a combination of the planning board, the council members, the council, another entity that might include council members and planning board members or whatever composition. There's no statutory requirement or best practice. It's whatever works best for the village of Wesley Chapel and what you think is the most appropriate.
Planning board sounds good.
Yeah, but you're biased, David.
Just a little.
Do you have to decide that today? Do we have to decide that today?
You don't.
Can we marinate on it until next
Can.
month? Anything else?
I sent Cheryl the final copy of the survey book. I don't know if she got it out to you, but we added some of those. We added some of the stuff that we talked about at the meeting at the beginning of March, and finally had a chance to get that all updated. And we included a number of responses for each one of the questions where it wasn't clear how many, the ones that 50%, we said how many people answered the question, how many people skipped it. So that information is right there on the page now.
So I will get that out to boards and committees and council, and we'll get it on the website.
Okay.
And start to disseminate it through the communications committee too. All right. We good? Anything else? We're good? Thank you, Ron. So this brings us to our continuation of the public hearing on CUP 20-01 for the construction of a wireless telecommunications tower at 6719 Newtown Road. So I need to make a motion to reopen the hearing, or I reopen?
It's just continued, so you're just continuing with the
Continue on.
previously opened hearing, I guess.
I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn.
This is the continuation of the hearing on the conditional use permit for the cell tower on Newtown Road. And I think that where we left off at the last meeting was that the applicant and the neighbor had been discussing some additional criteria for doing visualizations of the proposed tower. And it's my understanding that those items, that task has been completed, and I believe that he has submitted that to you at your seats. And I'll let the applicant explain what he has brought back this evening.
One thing, just a reminder. Yeah, it'd probably be okay to just continue, but we might as well re-swear everybody.
Right.
Just
Including the
Make it
people who
swear.
are going to talk. We need to re-swear you in.
And if you would state your names for me?
Trent Herrick. Ben Herrick, Herrick.
Lauren Whitaker.
I'm sorry?
Lauren Whitaker, W-S-C-K-E-N.
Is it Lauren? Okay. Okay.
Emily Sarkis. Lisa Chapman.
I'm sorry?
Lisa Chapman.
Okay, is that everyone? Okay. There's the Bible, and hold your right hand up and your left hand with you on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the whole, but the truth regarding this matter?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, what I brought for you today are 3 things. 2 of them relate to the second balloon test that we did. And the first thing I'd like to say is I owe Mr. Hadaway an apology. Because last time we were there, he turned in a photo set that I didn't think had any chance of being remotely accurate. But it turns out he was more accurate than I thought he was going to be. So I apologize to him on the record. Because I didn't think it was going to be like that. So, if you look on the photo sets, the first one with the balloon and the second one you've seen before, then on page 3, there's one with 2 balloons. This is right from his front driveway, his front door. So the bottom balloon is at 100 feet. That's a control balloon. That's what they use to make sure when it's windy. It was windy in March. When it's windy, they've got a control balloon. So that's at 100 feet, that's bottom one. And the top one is at 200 feet. So with that in mind, you see what the monopole will look like. And you will note that anything over 100 feet is going to be sticking out from the top of those trees. So moving it down 50 feet, it's still going to be predominantly there. What I'd like to do for mitigation, that we briefly discussed before, and this is to your point also, is we did an overlay of the driveway from this view, and it's not directly in line with this view, but it's close enough. So we'll move the driveway so there's a bigger offset. We'll move it to the, I think it's the west, up the road into the wetlands further, and we're allowed to go to the driveway. So that there won't be a lane from his front door to the base of the tower. So we'll move that. And then we also discussed an extra line of trees right in line of sight with the bottom, with the base of this, that are probably evergreens, so that when in the wintertime you won't see the base up to, and they'll grow, we'll get the list of what's going to be the best trees, and we'll do it. That's what we can do for mitigation from this view.
Are you still planning to keep the buffer of existing trees?
Yes. And if we move the driveway, then we won't have to take any of these trees out.
I was just trying to figure out the driveway in the back.
Yeah, I've got...
Like this view right here, which direction would the driveway be?
The driveway from this one, it would be like, if you're at like 12 o'clock, it is the tower.
Yeah.
You're at like, what do we say, it was like 1 o'clock? Yeah, it's like at 1 o'clock or 1:30, so it's close. So we'll move it enough so that it's not going to be in this view.
Okay.
And that'll be closer to line up with where his driveway already is. Okay?
And the evergreens, you said you're going to get really large, whatever the
We'll get them
things
as-
are that's on the approved list, in addition to everything else you had already
Correct.
on the list.
And then we'll put them in directly in line of sight from this in this line. So that even in the wintertime, they took this picture when there weren't hardly any leaves on the trees, but in the summer, they'll be all filled in, but in the winter we want to keep that too. Then the next page is the balloon from the road that we discussed from their neighborhood. And as you can see, it's not that different than the existing view. I mean, yes, you can see the tower, but there's also a power line towers there too that are almost at the same height. And then the last view makes almost no difference. The letter that goes with this explains what they did and how they did it. That's a letter from Henry Horn. So that explains how they did their balloon test and what they did. The other letter in there is from Verizon, from Stephen McKenna, who you guys met. He was here and gave testimony. We just wanted to make sure that when we discussed the height, I wanted it on the record from them, from their engineer, that says ideally it would be higher, but we're limited to the ordinance. That's why we chose 195 feet.
So there'll be no reduction in height.
And I think if you look at the second balloon test, a reduction in height isn't going to make a material difference from the roof on which you're decorated. But we are willing to take those extra mitigation steps that I mentioned. And then I do have the letter from Fisheries and Wildlife. I can't put it on the record, but you can see it. And I think did you get my email? Oh, you didn't? Was it you on the email?
I think you emailed it earlier.
Okay. All right. I'll show you the stuff from Fisheries and Wildlife that you asked about, but I can't put it on the record because it's proprietary. But you can see. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I know we talked about this before, probably a couple months ago.
Right.
How tall are the power line?
I don't know how tall that power line is.
No, I mean, on average.
I think the ones that we discussed that the RF people looked at were 140.
Okay.
But from this angle, it'll look the same as about from where it's all in perspective, right?
The tower could be setting up on a higher
Or it's just
elevation
further, or it's further
than the cell
away.
tower or any other things, right?
Yeah, just from being further away.
What about 50, 60 feet? You want to top the tower versus the top of the cell phone tower?
Right.
Okay.
So I think we've done what we can to make our case, and it's.
You've been accommodating. We're a tough crowd.
I appreciate you coming forward with extra mitigations to help address the concerns and for dealing with those who express their concerns. So, do appreciate that.
Any further comments before I call the public comment?
No, I don't.
All right, so first on the list for public comment, all comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is Mr. Trent Hadaway?
Yep, thank you. Well, I guess it's been since, I can't remember when we started this, but February I spoke with you, and I do appreciate the tough nature you have here. You have to deal with the balance of progress, which Ben is representing, and preservation of what we have. And that's the tough thing in city council. You have to make sure we're being good neighbors. So I do appreciate Ben doing this balloon test again and getting this to us. But you will see that my argument has been all along, I can't stop the progress of the city, of the village, and helping other citizens, but we can ask them to be accommodating. And shrubs that are buried within the tree line are not that accommodating. Moving the driveway, even though they asked, Ben just told me this, they asked to move the driveway up the hill to the left, which would be more like 10 o'clock. But again, the landowner has objected. So the landowner has objected to many things that would be accommodating to the neighbors. And the landowner, to my knowledge, has not been here yet. So you do have other landowners here. I'm not sure, maybe one of you live in the city. You might live in the city, not? You do, you live in the city. So one that's on the other side, but most of us have been here to say, hey, let's be accommodating. And my accommodation would be, let's move the tower down. First, I want to move it. Landowner would agree, just to move it back off the road. But let's move it down. Now, what we have here is a letter from Verizon's engineer that says that wouldn't be appropriate. It's not a study, it's just a letter. And of course, it might lead to more towers, more lower towers. Nothing wrong with that. We're not here to protect Verizon's profit margin. We're here to preserve what we want to live in. And so I'm just asking maybe to make that one exception. You can build your tower. Build it at 125 feet. Build it at 130 feet. Lower the tower. Why put this ugly obstacle right there in front of us? Bring it down to maybe the height of the existing tower. Okay, now I'm bending over backwards because I realize I can't change progress, but surely citizens here have some right to have council consider maybe making this landowner, maybe making Verizon make an accommodation. If they have to build more towers, so be it. It's okay. Let them build more towers at their own profit demise. It's okay. We're not here to protect that. And I'm in business. I'm a profit guy, so I'm all for profit. But it's okay. I also live here. So that's my argument. I can't really accommodate anymore. I've tried to be accommodating. I can't. That's all I can do is ask, just lower the tower. They'll be okay. And if our regulation was 400 feet, I promise you, this letter would say we can't operate a tower below 400 feet. It doesn't matter what the height is. That's what they're going to say. So this letter does not represent any kind of study. It's just an engineer putting his comments out. Okay? Thank you, guys. I hope you can see our order.
All right, up next is Emily Sarkis.
Thank you, Council, for hearing us again tonight, and thank you for requesting the second balloon test. So I'm Emily Sarkis, and I have a few things to just talk about. In the photos that I submitted here, please forgive me, this is just a clip art of a cell phone tower, but you can see that I also put the cell phone tower to the same exact height as the balloon. I would like to point out that his photos, or the balloon test photos, only show one layer of receivers, and I don't know the exact terminology, but one layer of receivers. Sorry, it's hard to talk with this. Mr. Herrick told us last meeting that we could have up to 3 to 4 layers. So it's convenient that this photo shows a minimal tower when we can see 3 to 4 more layers. Also, when we requested the balloon test, I did ask, I understand I'm not the council, but I did ask that they take it from the highest point of Paragon, and they did not. So this here is not the highest point of Paragon. They conveniently came around where you could see the electrical tower. And my picture is from the top of Paragon where you don't see electrical tower. That's my view. I don't see the electrical tower. I'd also like to point out that he keeps bringing up, oh, we already looked at an electrical tower, so this is fine to put a cell phone tower. I don't really see why it's okay to just keep adding stuff to us. Like, we have electrical tower. We deal with that. Why is it okay to just keep throwing out? We're going to throw another cell tower there? Because, well, we already looked at a cell tower and an electrical line, so let's throw more. I just don't think that's a valid reasoning. And there are no lights on the power lines. So this just doesn't add up to me, because the cell phone tower, which we established last meeting, is not necessary. There's no void in coverage. It's just supplementary. Therefore, it is not necessary. The gentleman over here, one of these gentlemen, told me after the meeting last week that the homeowner is not even doing this for his own profit. In my mind, I thought maybe someone in his family is sick and they really need this money, and I'm feeling bad for them. Come to find out they're not doing it for money. So this is all for Verizon? This isn't even for the gain of one resident who needs the money. This is just for Verizon, which, as he pointed out, why are we doing this for a corporation and their profit? land is not zoned for this, you guys already know that. So again, I don't know why we're pushing on behalf of Verizon to change our zoning. And this is going to negatively affect so many of us, many more that aren't here as well. I think that Wesley Chapel, this is a small town, a small village. There's like this country feeling. We have no obligation to Verizon. We have no obligation. There are towns who, if you Google it and find articles, will boast about the fact that they said no. They said, you can't take our small town charm. We're not doing it. And they just said no. So I'm asking you to please just say no to Verizon. We don't need it. We don't owe them anything. This is our place. This is where we live. This is our charm. So I please actually beg you to say no. Completely no. And if you must accommodate Verizon, which I'm not quite sure why any of us feel the need to accommodate this company, shorten, as Mr. Hathaway has requested, and no lights. But again, I don't know why we feel that we should make accommodations to Verizon. We have coverage. This is all of our homes, everything we've all worked for what? For a big company. So I hope that you please take that into consideration and keep Wesley Chapel's small town charm. Thank you.
Next is Laura Wilson.
I just want to go ahead and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. The reason, I'm
I
sorry.
can barely hear you. Would you ask that while you're
Sure.
I can hear you better.
Okay. I just want to take a minute to thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm a resident of Cavalon. I moved to Cavalon 5 years ago. I selected the village of Wesley Chapel to live in because I feel like this is a nice, quiet community. There wasn't a ton of, towers. The power lines, there's some, yes, but in that particular neighborhood, we don't see it, and we don't have to look at them on a daily basis. I understand that progress needs to happen. I don't think it needs to happen at 200 feet. I think that if we did have to have a power line, I agree with everyone, it needs to be smaller, and it doesn't need to have lights. My property value recently, my tax value recently went up about $150,000. I paid, people buying in that neighborhood pay between $600,000 and $700,000 for a home. I ask you, would you buy a home for $700,000 if you looked out your front door and you saw a cell phone tower? Because that's my view. I'm up high. I'm on the other side of the pond from Emily, and when I walk out my front door, I'm going to see a 200-foot cell phone tower. It'll be hard to resell it, and that's my own concern. I also have a concern about moving a new driveway on 12 Mile or Newtown Road. That road is already very narrow, and there's a curve right there. If we put a driveway to service that tower there, I'm concerned there's going to be accidents. There's no shoulder to pull away if someone does pull out in front of you. And there's, the road is extremely narrow. So I have a safety concern as well with putting the driveway there. So thank you guys for listening to me, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Is that it? Anybody have anything else to say?
You know,
Okay. Well, I just have a question, really. Address them, but with the documents that I showed you, are they attached to the application?
the official wildlife,
Yeah.
that was not attached to the application. But we do have to do them for federal regulations.
Yeah. But I was just wondering if for example, looking online, they're always, all of them are attached to the application, so I just wondered if you could submit it along with the application
Well,
to the town.
we submit to the town what the ordinances requires us to submit. So, and the environmental findings and the environmental impacts are a lot of proprietary information that we don't want to get out, but they did allow me to have you look at it, and I hope you were satisfied. Well,
So why would you find it?
because it's part of a larger package, that has a lot of data in it that isn't necessarily public data.
Could that be an isolated document? If it's public, from a public agency?
I mean, you read the letter
Yeah.
and the follow-up email.
And it says that there was evidence of there could be potential habitat for endangered plants and species.
And they found none on the site after a survey.
But it's still possible habitat for them to grow. It's an ideal habitat.
There are no endangered sunflowers on the property. So we're not endangering the sunflowers.
So then could we put it on public record for the benefit of Western Chapel?
I think I just did.
The public document.
The testimony is part of the record also.
So yes or no? Can we submit it?
I cannot give them the letter on the record. But we did discuss it, and you did read it.
And it says it's a habitat that is ideal for the sunflowers found in the vicinity and along as well as the Carolina Fields there.
But there are no sunflowers on the property.
Did you survey the whole property?
They surveyed the property.
All right, do you have, anybody have anything else?
I understand the concerns, and you'll recall that we had an expert who submitted a report and testified under oath that there's no diminution of property values from cell towers, especially even ones with lights, and that report is available. We did our best to mitigate, and I don't know if I need to, but I think on the record, I feel like, Ms. Sarkis, are you in Wesley Chapel, or you're outside of Wesley Chapel?
I am outside of Wesley Chapel, and my comps on my home sale will affect Wesley Chapel.
I understand.
Home
this.
sales, I also frequent all the businesses in Wesley Chapel, probably unlike you, and I support
Totally
all the
understand that.
people in the
Just
schools and
on
make
the
sure they're
record.
not to Newtown Elementary.
I understand that. I just wanted it on the record that you're not actually a Wesley Chapel resident.
But I support Wesley Chapel.
I totally understand that.
And my home comps will affect Wesley Chapel home comps.
I think we've hit everything we need to hit, and I'll ask for an approval.
So
Thank you.
I will close the public hearing.
Before you close here, just
Sure.
to summarize. This will be a monopole tower that can accommodate up to 3 antenna
3 antenna arrays.
arrays.
Right. Those are the things she was talking about.
Right.
The one is for Verizon. That's the one
And
with
that's your
pictures.
Verizon starts at the top.
Right.
Okay.
And your photo does not have the 3 layers.
And there will be no light because the FAA said not required.
Correct.
And there's no fake tree
Correct.
arrangement on it.
Correct.
And you're moving the driveway slightly from what was in the original drawing.
We will to mitigate the visual impact from Mr. Hadley.
So is that fair? And you're going to put in extra trees in addition to what was already listed in the buffer.
Correct.
Again, for Mr. Hadaway's view.
Yes, ma'am.
Just for my own benefit, as we know.
Right. And then to her point about the extra antenna arrays, I don't know if there'll ever be extra on there. We don't know. The tower will accommodate them. There's nobody lined up at the moment. It's just
We require the accommodation for
Yes, the ordinance specifies that they be built that way to avoid building additional cell towers. So that's why that would be up to 3.
And my question is there any reason that Wesley Chapel should do this?
All right, do you have anything else before we close the public hearing?
no, ma'am.
All right, so I just take a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Who seconded it?
Me.
Who made the motion? You made the
I
motion?
made the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So now it is time for council to discuss CUP 20-01. Anybody want to go first?
I just have a couple of comments, to your point is that, as was referenced in the agreement, and if you read the ordinance in which this is documented, there is a federal law that, 1996, that specifies, that we have to do these things kind of as a utility and make accommodations and everything within our zoning ordinance. It's not asking for rezoning, it's within certain zoning designations to accommodate cell towers, and then within them the things they have to meet, such as minimizing for the array and everything else. So just wanted to, maybe everybody in the room hasn't read that ordinance and the details with it. So there are things that are laid out that they're asking us to compare it to for this vote.
Adding to Lord, what you said, there's a need. I mean, this is an essential service. Nobody has landlines anymore. Everybody has cell phones. I also know that passing through that area on a regular basis that I do have. This is personal experience. I have cell phones. I have cell calls that have been dropped on 12 Off Creek. So I also on Newtown. So I feel like that there's a need. Also, we've heard a lot of opinions, but we have had experts testify under oath about what is needed. We got a letter from an engineer about what is needed. Nobody wants a cell phone tower in their front yard. Nobody wants electrical lines in their front yard. But I don't think there's anybody that will say we don't need electricity and we don't need Apple and consistent cell phone service.
I'm going to be the fly in the ointment and pretty much go the other end of the spectrum. My notes here say zero compromise from Verizon or landowner on location, on the overall height of the tower. Landowner has not attended any of the meetings, and where are all the people that are the residents that are here in favor of this tower? We haven't had any other than people from Verizon. They've also ignored the environmental issues that they say may or may not be affected. So I don't own a cell phone, so maybe that's part of my skewed opinion of this. But I don't want to see this out my front door when I get up in the morning. I see zero compromise from Verizon on height, the location, and I was elected to represent the people of Wesley Chapel on Verizon. So I'm going to be voting no. That's all I can do.
When I moved into my neighborhood too, I also, the land behind me was on R40, and I thought I was going to know what I was going to get. And I didn't get what I thought was going to go there either. And I would actually rather look at a cell phone tower than what I look at out my backyard. There's no way to make everybody happy and meet everyone's needs. It's not a fun seat to sit in.
And I do think, Vaughn, right, that when we look at the required findings, those 7 items that are drafted out, it's looking at those individual items and assessments based on the evidence we've heard here. Frankly, with regardless of our own personal opinions, right? Of what we would like or not like.
You're supposed to be a neutral arbiter of fact in this
Right.
case. No, it's the February meeting.
The findings.
You don't know?
I'm looking for it. I found the findings. The memo, CP, it's, yeah. I thought, no.
Okay.
it's
Does
not.
anybody else need it? I can,
Will you email it with her?
Can you send it to me too?
Do you?
And I will say that for the driveway, DOT will not put a driveway where, you know, they won't, if they don't deem it safe, they won't put a driveway in.
Well, it would be what, one car a month in that driveway?
So we have to address each of the following findings. Do we go through that list again? Is that how we do it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're finished with discussion, you would then run through the list. I don't have it in front of me,
The
but
set- the
Vaughn
list of
can, Vaughn
steps.
can walk you through it, and you would discuss and vote on. And you need to tie in specific. You can't just recite the facts or the conclusions. You have to actually identify things from the hearing, evidence that supports those findings.
All right. Any further discussion before we go through the findings? And we will understand that this is a quasi-judicial process where we are to be a neutral body.
Would you like me to go through each one? So there There are 7 findings of fact that are made in order to grant approval of a conditional use permit, and these are spelled out in ordinance and basically are the same for all conditional use permits. The first of these findings of fact that we're required to find is that the use will not materially endanger the public health, safety, or welfare located or proposed and developed according to the submitted plans, and not create dangerous traffic conflict points, noxious odors, sounds, glare, or environmental hazards. And I would assume that the absence of evidence of the creation of those, to George's point about making specific findings,
Right.
If something also has not been proven, then that would be evidence of compliance. So you can find that specifically in this case, if in another circumstance, if something was presented that showed that it created a bad traffic hazard, then you can cite that. If a traffic hazard was not shown to be created, then you would say that none of that specific item is not found to be shown in the evidence that was presented to the council.
Well, can you repeat the items again?
Yes, sir. So, the use will not materially endanger the public health, safety, or welfare if located where the proposed and developed according to the submitted plan, and not create dangerous traffic conflict points, noxious odors, sounds, glare, or environmental hazards.
So now we discuss whether or not there was evidence presented for or against it.
That showed that it would create them more.
So did anyone find evidence that would endanger the public health, safety, or welfare if located where proposed and developed? Or that it would create dangerous traffic conflict points, odor, sounds, or glare, or environmental hazards?
No. I mean, the traffic in particular was small driveway, very low traffic, some traffic during construction, but after that, minimal number of vehicles even passing through that driveway on a regular basis. There are no odors. There's no concerns raised about odors, and there was evidence presented around sound and environmental hazards of radio frequency, showing that it was safe. And so I think they presented evidence that shows they comply with these.
Mike, do you feel they presented evidence to the contrary?
Yeah, there's no issue with that one.
All right. So, do we have to vote on each one? Mm-hmm. So we make a motion that it does not interfere with item 1.
I make a motion when there's no evidence presented that would contradict item 1.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
The second finding of fact is that the use must meet all required conditions and specifications. That's referring to the conditions and specifications set forth in the zoning ordinance related to telecommunications towers and other general requirements.
And so that's where they presented evidence that the height, including the lightning rod, is 199 feet, less than what is listed in the ordinance, so it complies within the height section. Their layout showed compliance with specification for setback and trees and screening and fencing.
To do that, it also was presented to the planning board and passed planning board's recommendation.
So, any evidence to the contrary? So I'll make a motion that the use does meet all of Wesley Chapel's required conditions and specifications.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Item number 3.
The third item is that the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property and will not hinder future development potential of adjacent properties by the introduction of incongruous land use for incompatible development scale / intensity.
So evidence was presented from the real estate expert assessing similar situations in builds with cell phone towers and the effect of property valuations to show that there was no adverse effect to those in the area of the proposed tower. And it is consistent with the land use, given that the way it is called out within the land use ordinance for that zone. Anything to the contrary?
I think we've heard the residents' concerns, definitely, that it may affect, but again, we're charged with dealing with the facts.
Make a motion that the evidence presented shows that it will not substantially injure the value of the adjoining or other properties or their future development of those properties, and it's not incongruous with the land use. Any further discussion? Agreement? Do you mind telling us your...
Opposed.
What evidence do you feel presented?
I just don't think having a big cell tower out your front door is what people want to see and what's the job.
Number 4, the location and character of use is developed according to the plan as submitted and approved will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located. Will not disrupt the integrity of existing land use districts and will be in general conformity with this chapter and the village's land development.
So evidence was presented to explain within the ordinance and how the requirements are listed for a cell phone tower. However, it is out of character with the surrounding land. There are no other cell towers in this area. While there are power lines, it's not located directly near those towers, and it's offset from that, adding another visual disruption. And again, kind of going against the harmony of the area. Any further discussion? So you were nodding. So how would we make do we make a motion that it does interfere with the character of the use? Or that it's not in harmony?
If you have, just like with any of these others, if you feel there's sufficient evidence showing that it is out of character with the area, then you can find that it does not meet that particular finding of fact.
So we make a motion to accept this finding of fact and then vote against it? Is that what you just said? If we have evidence to say that agreed?
I may have misunderstood your, but I don't know if is there a motion on the, you made a statement regarding it being, I think I heard it's hard to hear a little bit in here, but your statement was that it's not in harmony with the area, right? And so the requirement is that you make an affirmative finding that it is in harmony. And so if you feel that you have sufficient evidence showing that it is not in harmony, then you or someone else in the council could make a motion finding that it does not meet that specific finding of fact number 4 with regard to not being in harmony with harmony with the area in which it is to be located. That is, you can find that it does not meet one of the findings of fact.
So let me make sure I understand you. We need to make a motion that it is in harmony.
You make the motion that
So each of those findings of fact have to be, you guys have to confirm and agree by a majority vote that each of those findings is true and correct. Then you move on to your conclusions and approve. You cannot approve the cell tower. You cannot approve any conditional use permit application without finding each of those 7 findings of fact to be valid, true, and accurate.
So the motion would be that we do not find the proposed tower to be in harmony with the area in which it is proposed.
And therefore does not satisfy condition number, or finding of fact number 4.
Finding number 4.
Was that a motion?
That was my motion. I was looking for nods that I said that right.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
So any further discussion? All in favor?
And what number was that?
4.
that's number 4.
So 4 was not a positive.
Yeah. So for the record, it may be helpful to explain that in a little bit more detail. What do you think the motion?
I think that's all right.
Okay. So we need to continue to do the rest of it.
Yeah, you need to do the rest of it.
So number 5 is the availability of services, including water, wastewater treatment, gas, stormwater, as required by the project.
That's fine. It's not going to need to do that. So I'll make a motion that it meets the finding of fact for availability of services, including water, wastewater treatment, gas, stormwater, as required by the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Number 6 is access to public streets and the adequacy of those streets to carry anticipated traffic and on-site circulation for both pedestrian, on-site and off-site vehicular traffic circulation patterns.
One through there a month, I don't see that being an issue.
Motion.
Motion to approve number 6.
I'll second.
All in favor?
And number 7, the final finding is that it must have adequate safety and emergency services, i.e. police, fire, and EMS to service the proposed use.
I don't think there's an issue there unless anybody can think of something. Motion to approve number 7. Number 7, right?
I'll second.
All in favor?
So the holdup was number 4.
Right, so you did not approve, you did not find that each of those 7 were true as based on the evidence presented to the council.
So what do we do?
Well, so now you would need to make an official motion to deny the application based on the lack of approval of all the findings of fact.
I make a motion to deny the proposed CUP as it is not consistent with all 7 of the required findings.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilman.
Air down and the council walking out the door.
I was like when I came in.
And I'd like to ask a few questions.
About this in
Are
general?
we going to go into closed session for this?
No, sure.
There was going. So they didn't meet this one finding. Can they come back?
Oh, yeah, it's some question for them.
They've spent too much money, I know, in this project to just go away.
They win some, they lose some, but they have to wait a year. Or do things.
Or they'd have to materially change their application, but I don't know how.
They could.
I guess they could cut the tower in half or something like that.
If they cut it, if there was some substantial change, a substantial change in location, a substantial change in height, something along those lines, I would bring it to you, and you could tell me if that was a substantial change or not.
Or 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll hear from their lawyers.
Either or.
You can take that call, George.
Sure.
Would it go to court or would it go to Board of Adjustment? Or?
No, this would be an appeal to the Superior Court.
Not enough lawsuits around here.
The one we instigated.
Right? This will be our own fault. A problem we created.
Right, try to deal with everybody else.
But I mean, we found our finding of fact, right? So
When we had the electric substation, they just went across the street to the county and waved at us and did what they wanted. So you could have that too.
This was in our jurisdiction, and it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. And I can share with y'all after the meeting some observations I made on spring break.
I mean, they brought evidence to you that showed what it was going to look like.
they
You were able to make conclusions based on what they submitted into evidence, so we'll hold on.
Hold on to all that.
And
I think harmony was actually one of my fourth grade vocabulary words.
I think it probably, my feeling is that you would be fairly safe in making that conclusion. I would probably make that conclusion if I were in your seat. So.
I mean, I didn't think we had any choice on that one. I mean,
Yeah.
It's certainly the one that sticks out as the most obvious.
Everything else, it doesn't make noise,
Right.
it's not going to have lights, it's got to collapse on itself, it's not a safety hazard, not like we get fire.
But it's not harmonious.
If you need it. It's not
Okay, well that was painful, but hey, this was our runner-up for next month. We now really know a little bit more about how this flows through.
This was
Do
gentle.
appreciate your coaching to help us
This was
get
very
through
gentle
it.
compared to what you're going to experience.
Next month could be fun.
I do feel a little bit better about going into next month, knowing, getting it all the way through the,
Yeah.
some more month.
We've done this twice now. This year we've done it twice. Yeah.
And what the key is to, in theory, you don't have to do what Vaughn and I told you to do, which is identify the items. I mean, the record in some ways speaks for itself, and you could just vote on those things. I've always found, and I think Vaughn too, it's much better to state the reasoning behind why you're making that decision, so it's clear and there's no question if there is an appeal or dispute about it. So the more contentious it becomes, the more important it becomes to be very definitive about those items and take notes during it. And I would suggest as you do these type of things, you have the memo from Vaughn in front of you and you're making notes as you go through as to the items of evidence that support or don't support those items. Because, again, the more contentious it becomes, the more important it is to have a good record and a good order that Vaughn prepares.
What we can do is I can make a little bit longer worksheet just to have with you.
I was just thinking that, I need a template that's like, item.
That's a good
pros
idea.
and cons, or evidence, yes.
And that way, as you're listening to the testimony, you can make notes.
I think that would be very.
But remember too, those notes are public record.
They're evidence.
So I say that
My
to,
personal notes are evidence.
oh yeah,
You want my doodles?
Good luck with that.
yeah. That stuff is all part of the public record. So like,
Do we have to send you a copy?
so don't don't email each other or text each other during same idea.
But in all seriousness, with our notes, how long do we need to retain these, or do we need to send them to Cheryl?
I mean, the notes are not the notes are not submitted as part of the record
Right,
of
but I mean,
evidence,
they have to be
but they are
retained,
public
like,
records that
record
ought to be
retention.
retained because they're for your use as part of the hearing. I think.
I would be prudent if you were observed taking notes and referring to them during your testimony. An astute attorney were out in the audience watching what you were doing, and you never know what's going to happen. It'd probably be rare, but I would be careful.
it'd be better to explain in a court what's in your notes as opposed to why you don't have your notes. If that makes sense. As a lawyer, it's a lot easier for me to attack you. Well, why did you destroy those notes? Why did, that kind of thing. So I do think it is a good idea to keep those notes, but I would not be elaborate with them. I would make them points so that when you get to the end, you don't have to recall everything as you're making those motions. You have bullet points on there, but
You could have told us this in December.
We're all learning.
Yeah.
So
It's getting late, let's move.
I appreciate that, Vaughn, and we'll get copies printed out for everybody for
I'm going to roll unless you guys need me for something.
Okay, so that brings us to operating procedures due to the pandemic. So Amy and Cheryl and I had a really great staff meeting last week. I think we're okay with things going. I'm okay with things just continuing. Amy's doing a good job of handling the office. The only thing that has been brought to my attention is moving back into these seats, but needing to confirm that everyone is vaccinated and has gone their 14 days post-vaccination.
Considered fully vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated. Everybody that has their 14 days? Everybody had their 2 shots.
Yes.
So is everyone okay if next month we Zoom up here?
With masks.
With masks still.
I'm tired of sitting down here.
I'm tired of this.
Anybody wants to move seats?
Although I would like to have more space up there because I really got used to this.
You want the empty this? You want the empty space beside you so you can really spread out? You have 2 desks? We could make that happen. So, and then I will ask planning board the same thing. If they can confirm that everyone is vaccinated, then they would be welcome to resume, seating up here with masks alone.
And we're still going to retain the seats like this.
Yes,
on
I
the
think
floor.
for the people.
I'll get rid of these tables.
Yeah, we might do.
Because at the county level, what they did was they used to have the county commissioners and the clerk and the secretary and all those people were up here. And when they started COVID restrictions, they moved all of the staff down on the floor and kept the county commissioners up there. Obviously, we have a lawyer, the clerk, and the planning and zoning over there. But I mean, if that's not enough space for the 4 of us, which I think it is, we could always move down.
So I'll try to call Sousa and talk to him about confirming that everyone is vaccinated to resume a less than 60 distance.
With masks.
With
With
masks.
masks.
And I would just say that we are doing this, and it is not necessarily like what I saw our county commissioners observing in public meeting without wearing masks. And I do think that we have to make sure we are supporting the rules because this is a public health safety issue. So we will wear our masks, we'll have hand sanitizer, we'll continue with the chair space, and some chairs can be close.
We've just been lucky, we haven't had a ton of people show up for a meeting because we've only got seating for what, 15, 20?
We will next month.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I want to get these
That's
tables
why
out
we need to
here.
be up
Right,
there.
but
And we need to be up
still-
here with more seats in the
But
audience.
even
Bring
then,
them up
they still
here.
need to limit the space in here. Just because they bring more people doesn't mean they get to stand shoulder to shoulder in here.
Well, for those of you who don't know, the reason we're set up the way that we are, so when COVID hit, I laid all this out with the seats and chairs. I can do the same one, get rid of the get rid of the tables and just bring the chairs up. Again, keep them in pairs, but 6 feet apart.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that they still can't crowd in here like the deputies did that night.
How many people were here?
And it still has supposed to be like 50.
Well, our capacity, there's a-
Capacity.
We have a capacity, but
There
that's
was a thing
pre-COVID
along.
capacity.
Yeah, but I mean, for the CEP last month, how many people were here?
There weren't that many. I mean, there were some, but it wasn't
Some libraries,
crowded.
like the Sealand before.
Yeah. And I'm just saying because I think that, the only other thing is like the podium and the microphones is I don't advocate going to using the podium microphone. people coming up. I think they just need to come up and speak loudly.
Our capacity is 104 with just chairs. Obviously, with distancing and all. Is everybody like the fact that there's doubled up? Because I figure most of it's going to be a husband and wife team. So I'll just set it up like this, where there's 2 chairs put together every 6 feet and bring them all the way up to here, so we'll have more available.
Judging by the number of couples we've actually had in here, that is not what's going on. But maybe next month.
They can always move their chairs.
But yeah.
We might well do what we do. And, if 3 people show up and they pull a chair over.
Yeah.
You know.
Or don't pair them all up. Well, I don't know. But I just don't think we should go back to the microphone on the podium for the speakers.
Well, the microphone's not working anyway, so.
Well, it's, in theory, I'm just saying.
Well, maybe if you'll do that, we'll appreciate it.
Take down the table, bring in more chairs and space them out.
Let me talk, oh, shoot. Planning board meets next.
I'm going to talk
We're
about
talking to planning board, let's see if they can confirm.
it. It's an hour project. I can do it before our next meeting.
Because it might be that just during planning board, they might need to have a table up here for people who are not. Because I know at least one person who is not.
If we could get 4 or 5 up here, then put a couple tables across here, then get rid of these 3.
So is the plan that if the planning board cannot confirm that everyone will be participating up here has been vaccinated, then they still have to stay down here? Is that what we're telling them?
I think.
Because, they always have a substitute. They always have one.
Right.
Well, they have 5 regular members, so
Yeah, but I'm
the
saying
alternates
they don't have 100%.
would sit down here anyway.
I feel like if we're asking people to get closer than 6 feet from each other, we need to confirm that they, medically speaking, can be.
Well, you can put the tested up there, the untested down here.
But I'm saying, yeah, the whole thing is like the 5 regulars, they're all vaccinated, they can sit up there. We don't have 100% of the regulars all the time. That's my point, is that if then, say, one of the alternates isn't vaccinated, well then, no, you don't get to sit up there just because you're the alternate and I've not been vaccinated. Because that defeats what we're trying to do.
But if we can get rid of, just keep these 2 tables, get rid of these 3 red chairs up
Yeah,
there.
maybe keep these 2.
Yeah.
I would say we can confirm. George says he can't ask to see cards, but if we can confirm you're vaccinated, we can allow you to be closer.
Under oath.
I pulled mine out and just showed them. That's what I've got.
Well, I'm not, I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. I took pictures of it.
Somebody
I'm
else
like, I'm not losing this
Somebody
sucker.
else see
I'm not losing this.
Somebody in Charlotte's making fake ones and selling them on eBay.
I hate to do
Is that what
that.
it's all?
I hate to do that, Wesley Chapel, we're low government, but we are still obligated to keep people safe while they are participating.
I refuse to be a party to a super spreader event.
So if everybody's cool, I'll talk to John and then we will go from there. We'll leave these 2 tables. Performance evaluations. I have those procedures. Shit, you just already know. Okay, contract administration and rules of procedure. Lori sent some. I will say that we figured out that the part about missing meetings and not getting paid is not in here. So I will try to find, I don't know where it went, but I'll try to find it and bring it back to us. Because we added it in.
Yeah.
It's just not in this version. So we'll find it and bring it back around.
I think it was being habitually abused by one former council member.
And I don't think we have that problem now.
No.
So we might can lessen it a little bit.
Well, it was voted on before, but was it actually voted on to be a rule of procedure?
We had to.
I remember doing it, I just didn't remember.
But it's not a rule of procedure then?
In a 12-month span, we had somebody miss 18 meetings. Because if you add up the budget meeting, the special meetings, it was ridiculous how many they missed.
But I do think there's something to be said, and I'll just say this, not for the record, but my mother's got some medical condition. I have no control over her schedule, procedures, or anything else. Right? And so, I'm telling you that so when I tell you the next part, I'm like, but I do feel like that, if you're taking this job, you know what you're signing up for, but there should be a limit, right? That, you're signing up for 12 monthly meetings and maybe 2 extra meetings or something, but I don't think any of us thought we were signing up for weekly meetings for example, if it gets to that. And we also have our other meetings like Iowa Carpo, when you have Blue Mine, you know, all of those other things that come into play. So to your point about kind of lesson, I think it's really the regular meetings, budget meetings, that the attendance is really important.
Well, there's use and there's abuse.
Exactly.
Exactly. If for some reason that Lori's mom procedure is on that Monday, I'm going to ask y'all for another meeting. That's okay. Because I would appreciate your perspective at the
I just, you know, I just go up and transport the crew. But, so, yeah, so, and because also the other piece was in there, now was the mayor piece from the last time. All right, that if the mayor steps down, then they're not, or if any member steps down, obviously they shouldn't stay.
If you, yes.
All right, and then I sent you guys something on the approval of contracts and authorization of expenditures. So some of this was the language already in there.
Right,
Rest of it. Thank you so much for walking us through everything in one. And so in thinking about some of the recent things, and this is kind of where my head went tonight about with the trees and other things, how can we streamline this process? But I really feel like that I've seen examples of contracts where we don't seem to have included performance measures or detailed scope of work and timelines and other things that have maybe bite us in some senses, or not having penalties for failing to do that. I know in my business, there's contracts, there's fine penalties each direction, you know, just all those things are things to protect us. And then really designating the other big piece of this is, I guess, the number. Really get the point of contact, project manager, one point person, one contractor or vendor to go to, and to deal with and to make sure we're not missing things or sending contradictory messages or anything, particularly if we're going to be trying to hold them accountable for penalties. So that was the gist of what I was trying to say here.
I wish it could be one policy that encompassed every situation, but unfortunately, different situations require different levels of notification.
But all we're saying in this and proposing is that we designate somebody, and it can be a staff member. So, for example, cutting the grass, right? We've got a contract. We say, Cheryl, you're the point of contact. Amy, you're the point of contact. We just designate that as an ongoing thing. We know what we're going to accept. You get ready to do another amphitheater or playground or town hall or something big, then I think we need to be more consideration of officially naming a project manager, a single point of contact to do those, and to funnel everything in both directions through. And, you know, council has to define their scope of authority, kind of to your point about not one size fits all. The council decides their scope of authority. So we say, sure, you have the ability within, you know, $50 with a lawnmower. If they need to do something else, it's fine. You can make that decision. If you need to come on a different day, you can decide that. We council has that ability to define that the way it's not specifying a one-size-fits-all procedure as much as we're going to designate these things and actually discuss them with each contract. So anyway, I wrote it out. So you can see it. Try to give you some time to look at it.
I like it. I mean, in our business, we've got a project manager that is the final say on every project. And that way we don't have general contractor asking 8 different people 8 questions and getting 8 answers. You've got one person, one source to go to. And I think for anything that we do business-wise with a vendor, I think that we need to give them that one point of contact that will hopefully speed up the process and clarify any things that they have. I like it.
And then the other one I had was about going to closed session, and I just remembered this from essentials training, was we didn't have to read out the whole statute number, title, and all the other stuff. We just have to say in generalities.
but when I sent it to Cheryl, I think the book says different.
Yeah.
Well, what they said in Central Street, I don't know if you remember, it was like, you
Tell me
know,
the thing.
I remember sitting in the meetings in here and Brad and everybody trying to get all the godly book of what the numbers were and everything else. And it was like, hey, you don't have to do that. You have to say we're going in for legal counsel, going into closed session for personnel discussion.
I guess the question is, anybody ever called us on it, one way or the other?
No, I'm just trying to say that we don't end up having to spend all that time trying to remember all the numbers and we say we're going to closed session. That's all.
But it does say, the motion to enter closed session must cite one or more of the permissible basis for closed session listed in paragraph B of this rule. A motion to enter closed session under subparagraph must contain the additional information specified in those provisions. I think we
Because
could
it's
go
not
ahead.
list the statute number. You just have to say you're going in for legal counsel or you're going to discuss personnel, right?
It says you must cite one or more of the basis. So you could say, because I think we have,
But my issue is this, who's calling us on this?
well,
I'm not looking at this as anybody's calling us on it, well, the contract piece, but the other piece I'm looking at and saying what makes sense and what's consistent with what I heard in training. That's all.
Going into closed session to conversate with their lawyer.
Right, that's all I'm saying we need to do. We don't have to quote the statute number.
well, I will take it to George.
But that was my comment was that in the Central Standard, I said, you don't have to do that. You do have to say, we're going to go into closed session for legal counsel, we're going to closed session to discuss personnel. And you're like, no.
And I was like, the one that wasn't discussed, I don't remember.
Yeah. I think I remember from sitting in so many council meetings with Brad Stellander and trying to make sure the voters. Made an impression.
But we could, between George and the school government, we can get
All
our
right. Anyway, that was my suggestion.
Okay. We'll come back to those again, so finish them up this month, okay? The last few pages, and I'll try to figure out what happened to the, remaining. To our previous changes that we can't find.
We'll find it.
Yeah, we'll find it. That takes us to performance evaluation. I have several forms. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. I like the one that's a little more concise, and I will clean it up and have it to y'all by the end of the week. Okay?
I do think it's important that we compare the job description to what we're asking them, how we're asking them to be rated.
So when I give you your forms, I'll also give you the job description and all that.
It's welcome process. The staff members evaluate, that they do a self-evaluation and then meet with you.
So they're going to self-evaluate. We're all going to evaluate.
Okay.
So if you will print it and fill it out,
Okay.
and leave it for me or bring it to me, I'll compile them. That's what Brad did. He compiled them and then did them.
Okay.
And then that way we'll have them back before our May budget meeting. So they'll be done before then. So maybe I'll ask that everybody if I get them to everybody by Friday, if staff and us can have them done by our next council meeting, so I can have them consolidated in that way. Actually, because I don't give me a week to consolidate them.
Well, and the reality is, if you're going to ask me 10 things for each one of them individually, there might be 5 things for each one of them individually that I'm going to say, I don't know enough either way. So I'm not sure you're going to be able to do one.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Then I can do a week. So if y'all have them back to me and staff can have them back by the council meeting, I'll try to put them together and get them done before our budget meeting. Okay. All right. So, Friday. Update of the county workshop that we went to and Lori attended virtually. I thought it went well. I learned some things. You know, have anything you want to talk about? We were all there and Lori listened to it and heard about it.
All I saw was the cameras were set up with commissioners sitting there with no mask.
I would think bulletproof.
No.
Their dais is bulletproof. I'm jealous.
No, they've got carbon fiber across the front of their dais.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Wow.
Plus, they usually during the county commissioner meeting, you have a sheriff standing on the left side, and then a sheriff standing on the right side.
I think they'll probably do another one shortly.
Another
And
one,
another meeting, he had talked about doing them. Or maybe Dennis and Richard had talked about
I
they
think
were
they said that
interested
at the Woodland meeting.
in doing it quarterly or
Yeah,
they
they
might
were
like
saying
doing
so.
more.
Well, let me ask this question. What was your biggest takeaway from the meeting?
Sewer capacity.
What's that? Sewer
Sewer
capacity.
capacity.
You know,
So they got to stop, they got to handle it.
well, we've been telling them that for 4 years now. They're finally going, oh, you mean it's going to be a problem?
Why? You mean it's related to water? However, planning board in May will see the 12 Mile Creek neighborhood. And it'll be interesting to see if they follow through with that or not. We'll know if they're serious if they turn that neighborhood down.
Well, the project that was over behind the Auto Bell car wash on Collins Road got withdrawn when I wish it hadn't, because I wanted to see if it had gone to the county commissioners, if they were going to vote it through or not. And that would have told us whether they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do, or if they're just blowing smoke. So,
Why was it withdrawn?
because they knew it wouldn't pass. So they withdrew it. And,
So they can reapply now, right?
yeah. So, and, you know, my frustration, and I've shared this with some of you already, we're talking about the 2050 comp plan. Where are you going to be in 30 years? You know, or okay, here's the list from 1991, 30 years ago. Let's start doing that list now. Well, no, I mean, let's focus on making a list of something we can do in the next 5 to 10 years, not the next 3 decades, because we may all be driving flying cars in 30 years. Who knows? So it's frustrating to me to be talking about something that's 30 years out when some of the county commissioners won't be alive in 30 years.
Is this going to be your platform?
This is. This might be. So my frustration was, guys, focus on stuff you can actually fix. Don't focus on stuff that's 30 years out.
Might come for the here and now.
But I will say that if you understand the whatever school Walton kind of go to, right? That if somebody is not looking at 20, 30, 50 years, nothing's ever going to get done. So there has to be that long range and short range balancing act and everything else, because in all honesty, the lack of any forward thinking, looking in Union County is probably the situation with water and sewer.
Well, my takeaway from the meeting was we identified the top 3 problems: school overcrowding, sewer issues, and roads. If we don't fix those things, we can't fix those things in the next decade.
Yeah, they need that water line too, because then you have a school board says, no, we don't need more buildings, we don't need anything. And if you have flooding issues with roads, it gets very frustrating.
But we spent more time making lists of problems than we do actually fixing problems, and that's my frustration. And I've talked to some of the county commissioners about that, and they kind of jokingly agreed with me that, yeah, 30 years from now, they're not going to be alive, so.
Alright, so Bluma update. Last meeting was at Weddington. It went well. Weddington just got massacred on social media for the municipal trash collection. Apparently letters finally went out to their residents and they got slammed by a couple residents.
They're mandating one trash company.
They are researching going in with Marvin and doing municipal trash collection. And they have, in my opinion, they have very valid reasons, like the roads and how expensive it is with all these garbage trucks and, containers on every street. We said we're not interested in that party, but they got it. they got blasted. Because you have to identify the resident like a year in advance that they're looking into it, and the bidding, like they're trying to research the whole process.
Well, the issue the residents are having, and I've dealt with this even in my own neighborhood, let alone Wesley Chapel, let alone you.
Oh, we have it in our neighborhood too.
If you're used to GBUSA, but they treated you poorly, you left there and you went to somebody else. If now the municipalities can say, we have to use this company, I'm like, well, no, I used that company in the past, and we've got 3 different garbage companies that come through our neighborhood. Well,
We have about 6.
but
We have 0 houses.
the sad thing is that there's garbage cans out 3 different days a week. They're always there from early in the morning making noise or coming late at night. No one's consistent on price. No one's consistent on actually picking up the garbage when they're supposed to. And some people are like, I won't use him, but I won't use them either. I'm only going to go with this company. And now they're forcing something down your throat. It's never going to go smoothly.
Well, I think what people are objecting to is letting them proposing like the budget increase is like ridiculous. But that doesn't mean that their taxes are going to go up. But the assumption is it's like giant tax increase. So I'm glad that's their problem right now. I wish our neighborhood would just come straight on one. I'd be happy with that. But.
And one of the trash companies came to me when I was on the homeowners association and said, if you can get all 148 houses in this neighborhood to use one company, I'll cut your bill in half. $15 a quarter.
Oh, wow. You could do it? Yeah, somebody in our neighborhood just did all the research and people were not happy.
Even if you tell the people they'll pay half of what they're paying now. Can't do it.
But the next meeting we're having, I think it won't really be that applicable to us, but it'll be interesting to learn. They're going to talk a little bit about roads and the POW mill and all that fun stuff. They are, just like we passed a resolution against the single-family housing zoning change. I did email them. I know Weddington actually called me and said, hey, can y'all pass one too? Even if it doesn't have traction at the state, if we speak out now, maybe it'll be a while before they keep coming back to it.
Or could there be one from a group?
Yeah, it's on the agenda. I asked Jeff to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Because I can't imagine anybody not agreeing with that at the municipal level. And are the county commissioners attending those meetings?
Mm-hmm.
Well, see if we can get the county to agree on a standardized one for the entire county. Because I think nobody wants to give up that control, and it still goes back to I want to find out who specifically is spearheading this from the beginning, whether it's a developer, whether it's a politician, whether it's...
Somebody has to sponsor the bill, right?
Exactly. So there's got to be a method to the madness.
John, will that be the sponsor for?
I think that was Mark Brody, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think it's Mark Brody.
Wow, well, that doesn't really surprise me. That those two would be.
Yeah, that's why I was like, there we go.
Yeah.
Who was on?
Durham and Raleigh.
Oh, I thought it was Mark Brody for Union County.
Well, this was in that house.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's when I was like, oh, here we go.
And we're still asking for an email flood to the politicians to, is that getting any traction?
I've had a couple calls from residents that asked me about sending it, but just a couple. But that's it. The litter suite, do you have anything you want to add about them?
As far as moving, no.
Litter sweep is Saturday. I'm planning to go. Siler has some volunteers, and then their youth group is trying to volunteer.
I
We
brought it
have
up at
two.
the Voice Count
You
meeting,
did?
just before this meeting.
So we have 2 families signed up, but one that might want to just focus on their neighborhood. And then Deb and I think are going. And then
Are there set roads or set paths or?
he was going to wait and see how many volunteers we had. He said he will let me know Wednesday or Thursday. One day. We don't have that many right now, so.
Did we get a packet from the DOT about for garbage bags and stuff
He's
like that?
able and all that. The litter buster guy.
I get you a few of those small things too, for picking up garbage.
I don't really want to reach my email.
My back, last thing I want to be doing is bending over every 30 seconds to grab a soda can.
I'm also reminder on social media, if you will send out a reminder on the sunshine.
I did.
What time is it on Saturday?
I have it like once a week. I'm doing it.
Thank you. I think it's
8 o'clock.
that's
And 8 to what?
11:30.
I know that we're doing it Saturday because Weddington is also the one we're trying to.
Apparently it's the whole, it's like a statewide thing.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So there's several towns in Union County also.
It's kind of like Earth Day, related, I think.
Is there a plan to do this again? Because
It comes
well,
up every
I
year.
was going to say unfortunately, but I'm not going to say unfortunately. Fortunately, I'll be cooking Captain Crunch pancakes for Bennett Boyce's 2-year-old, second birthday, so I won't be there.
Yeah, I think it's trash by your house, did I stop in?
Captain, just bring a box of Captain Crunch. We'll make pancakes. But do they do this on a regular basis?
Yeah.
It's usually once a year.
Only once a year.
I think they do it in the fall.
DOT does it twice a year.
Well, we've done it before. So,
We'll see how many volunteers we get. It'll be interesting. But he was going to email a plan.
I've got, the Humane Society's got a pet pantry on that Saturday. My job is to carry the 40, 50 pound bags of dog food to people's cars. So if I can find somebody to sell for me, I'll be there. I gotta find somebody who can carry 40, 50 pound bags of dog food. I can't ask my daughter to do it or my wife or.
It'll be okay. We'll get, I mean, at least we're starting somewhere, you know? We're starting somewhere, so. We already did the American Rescue Plan Act. We don't have an update, so that leaves us to council. Who else here?
I'll go first. Mike, like you said, coming out of the county meeting, sewer capacity, school or grouting roads, but those were the three major concerns. And it seems like Wesley Chapel, the only thing really that we're affected by are roads. And I think it would be good for us as a council through the communications committee to maybe just give an update on some regular basis of what control we have over roads, but also sort of let them know what's coming up on the carpo.
And I'm trying to do that with sending some things to Cheryl, some things to post, or, you know, like you take part in this, or I'm trying to pass those on.
I think it would be a good idea, especially with the number of complaints I've got from my daughter about this ride here.
You can stop at the grocery store like I do.
Yeah, with
They're planning to repave this though, right, Cheryl?
Mm-hmm.
This is getting repaved.
But again, having the information like that we can share, I think would curb some of the calls and improve this.
The county had it on their website that they let a contract, but I hate to put it out because if I put it out, somebody's going to be, is it next week? Is it today?
I
Why?
think it's more about saying, here's information, because they have very nice interactive, both Carpo and your interactive websites where you can show, like, this is a critical intersection, and here's construction, and here's some detail, and now here's a picture of what we're proposing, and, you know, they've really done a nice job, I think, on that. I think it's more about keeping those things as, if you want to know what's going on in transportation, you know, here's the link, as opposed to us, you know, until we know some things are really more definitive, but I do think every now and then we have to draw a bone.
Yeah, I don't think the average citizen resident is going to go to that trouble to find out. But it was posted, you know, on the Facebook page.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like, hey, it's here. You know, this is really cool. You know, it's interactive because they keep that up to date.
The roundabout at Newtown.
Watch on the trail road.
Yeah, is it moving forward? I saw where they have done some surveys.
What they're doing right now is rerouting the commercial gas line.
Okay.
And the telephone poles have to be moved out. And
So that's a preparation.
Well, ideally, they're not going to close that road to do the roundabout until school is out.
Well, that's what they said already. This is not do that.
Yeah, well, that is a
I'm just saying.
that is a critical intersection. Yeah, so, yeah, that was the number one question my neighbors asked me is when that roundabout's going in. And I said, then they saw the building come down, we used to sit there.
And then they got excited and you're like, I'll get it.
But the way they work, like the project has to get approved, it has to be funded, and then it has to be, you have to acquire right of way, you got to do the design and the costing, and then you got to move utilities, and
It adds years.
Yep.
It's something that if you look at it, instead it shouldn't be hard.
Yep.
It
Exactly.
should be so hard for this family to.
Well, even if you've got the money for a project and approve it, first thing you do is just tell the electric company to move the telephone poles back, and they'll say, okay, we'll do it. 18 months. And you go, we're ready to start. I'm like, no, we'll put you on the list.
Well, no, you're counting, but
But I got asked by a resident who also lives in my house and sleeps in my bed what was going on there. I didn't know, because to your point, you know, the next question would have been, well, when is this going to start? I don't know. Don't put it. A happy wife is a happy wife, I guess. That's probably what I put.
I feel like, David, I feel like you read my lips better than my husband does, that I hear you over there. You sense me. You feel what I'm talking about.
Well, I was following David. So today Jordan had his quarterly Union County Carpo meeting, just to basically give us a preview of things. So the spring solicitation for projects that I don't know for projects like the run over, it's like, hey, we need additional funding, and then we'll have the fall solicitation and that's all, and everything else, just kind of reminding us of those, and again, talking about the interactive maps and the highlights and everything else, and Division 10 representation, DOT, maintenance, it was like 3 or 4 of the guys were on the call, and shared a few things, again, related to budgets and how they had to cut back so severely because of the revenue cuts. They eliminated staff, and so now they're trying to ramp back up, but they're trying not to overcompensate too quickly. They just don't want to get back. So it's slower. It is making headway to get towards normal again, but it is slower. For that reason, they talked about maintenance. I can't remember if I asked a question or how it came up, but anyway, one of the comments they made was that like Weddington Road was horrible, or 84 was horrible, and they got all those potholes. Well, they won't come out and fix those potholes if it's on the list to be resurfaced or to have an intersection improvement or something, shortly in the future. And he admitted, he said, but what happens is we think that's going to happen, so we don't do the potholes, and then it gets delayed, like there's no funding or whatever, and then things don't get repaired because of that. It was also raised that at times they've done some repairs, and they didn't have the funds to buy material, so they reuse material, like the stuff you scrape up and stick it back in, and it doesn't hold up as well. And so, you're kind of throwing money away. So that was kind of an interesting little tidbit. 2 interesting comments. 3 things. Talked about the silver line for links that within Stallings and Indian Trail and decided they're going to be over there on 74 near the Atrium campus and a parking deck and a transit center where you can walk to it, as well as park there and you can ride the train, as well as a station at CPCC for it to really help kind of get more that long-term transit into the area. Monroe Road right-of-way acquisition is starting on Monroe Road widening. Right-of-way acquisition is underway in Stallings and starting in Indian Trail. I was like, well, that's progress. And then Weddington commented that they are looking at design and cost considerations to do something at the intersection of Deal Road and 84 because the railroad extension continues to get delayed. But no commitments, they're just investigating, researching.
It sounds like the 2050 comp plan.
Huh?
They think Deal's worse than any.
Because of middle school.
Oh, okay.
It's all in middle school. Because I would say it's harder to get Antioch.
So they're paying engineers and making more lists, but not actually doing any improvements.
Well, that's now, I just don't know.
That's frustrating.
I think it's the county you can move on.
And then they talked about like the critical intersections, one of the 74 and Potter, and they talked through that with Mayor Becker was on the ball, and just talking about how they work with the town and everything in the presentations and talking about the design, and it sounded like it's a good partnership there. One of those is one that makes the list for funding and whatnot.
Well, I'm glad you're taking over that responsibility, representing us at the meeting, because I would be pushing back really hard. I mean, and you're more political, and I understand that.
Now, I'm not political, there's also the point of, you know, I got enough flat spots in my head, but it's about really understanding the process and how to interject. Like, everybody complains, it's not like everybody sits there, it's just, well, you know, the same complaints get raised and said, it's also a recognition and appreciation that
But they
it's
ask
not
us,
like people are intentionally trying to.
they ask us for a list of critical intersections every year, and every year we provide them. Every year they don't do them.
But even the ones that Union County sent to Carpo, like one in Marshall, didn't make the cut. Because the data didn't support it based on the criteria we used to judge. And all that criteria, that we got a technical committee and a project oversight committee, and they come up with a criteria to how to rank things and what's most important, and the board votes on that criteria, and then it gets applied. It's very objective to take out all that subjectivity, because you know every town's just going to come in and say, I want my stuff. But to apply that to it, you know, it really does help, I think, the process.
But the process is a lot more fair now than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it wasn't about the statistics or the numbers, it was about who you knew.
Exactly, and it's really moved away from that.
And I'm glad to see that, but at the same time, we keep providing these lists of, here's the intersections, here's the numbers, here's the stats. But let's ignore it because we're going to ask you again next year. And we don't actually.
It's not that they ignore it, I think they're just continuing to build out and trying to move forward. Like one of the comments they said, if you guys made a comment that on one of the surveys, you know, people have completed the surveys and put in information that they actually became aware of, and probably want to know what's wrong. Because of people.
I just got one small thing, and Cheryl, I want to apologize in advance, but I'm going to bring this up. We had to push off this item for the Heritage Project. Why was it that we just got this at the last minute? I mean, I'm sure you're going to get a phone call from that guy tomorrow morning going, what the hell?
Well, it was just sort of a mix-up between Vaughn and me.
Okay. No, I agree with David that if we're just going to get this when we're sitting down at the desk, or just got an email to us this afternoon, that's not enough time to give it its due look over. At the same time, I want to reduce that to as few instances as possible.
It's really no different than this right here. I don't like this at all.
I
There's
agree.
no excuse for that.
I agree. And we've told John, John knows the 2-week rule. It's got to be 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever it is we agreed on.
If they don't have a forum, I don't have any confidence they're going to let this event.
Well, my frustration with Parks and Rec is, okay, we've got this one simple job to do it. Will you do it? Will you show up to the meeting?
Exactly.
John and I carry 99% of the workload on Parks and Rec. The rest of the people show up for the meeting sometimes, but they don't actually. Julie actually said she didn't want to do anything.
Which Julie?
Julie Brown. She keeps saying she's moving to Florida. She's been moving to Florida for 2 years now, and we said, well, can you please make some phone calls on this issue? No. So, you know, I understand John's frustration with trees and everything else, but man.
But I'm just like, that's why I'm pushing on the budget stuff. It's like, we know these things happen. They don't happen every year, but they're going to happen on some frequency. And the more stuff, the more things we're doing in that park, I think the more trees are going to get damaged and fall.
But you're right. This should have been, you know.
We should have had that 2 months ago. We were planning this. They talked about it for months. We're planning this event. It should have been, here's our budget, and here's what we need. There's no excuse to bring it to me and hand it to the town.
I agree.
He's just actually one he had his own reform.
I'm thankful that we all realize that 30 minutes of darkness, semi-darkness, is not worth $1,200. But my final comment, we're reviewing our rules of procedure. I think it is time to probably have our committees review their charters. Parks and Rec has term limits. I mean, they don't have a long-standing a long list of people who want to join, but
Whoever shows up gets to be on the committee.
yeah, basically. But they might, the communications committee has some new members. It might be time for just to read it and review it. But because one thing I would like to see Parks and Rec do is think outside of Dogwood Park. You know, like and Rec is more than Velvet Park. So, but so we might need to, if y'all are okay, I might tell them to at least review their charters with their groups. We're reviewing our rules and procedure to review their charters. And I have been asked to present a municipal update via Zoom to the Chamber of Commerce in June. So they said you can do it for 40 minutes. And I said, I don't need 40 minutes. We don't have 40 minutes worth of anything to talk about. So I told her I could maybe do 15 and an extra 5 questions. It'll be on Zoom.
Will this be similar to what you did with the county?
I thought I'd take that same presentation and kind of
That was a good presentation.
take, thank you. And just maybe take that we're working on our comp plan and take a few of those things. So, maybe go over our committees that we have, just a few more like FYI. I figure, Cheryl and I discussed, the only question I'm going to get is, what happened to the youth council and where's my daughter's certificate?
Well, we've lost the youth committee, we've lost the safety committee, because we've had lack of interest in doing that.
But there'll be only one person who will be on the call that will be interested in one of us. So I'll just be prepared. So I'll let y'all know how that goes. But that's
Students who participated were recognized for program.
this is true. That's what I would say. Well, we did recognize the last group of active students in the program.
Before we adjourn, you guys do the signs.
Okay. Is everybody done? Motion to adjourn?